The war in the maze that lasted for decades has come to an end. After defeating tens of thousands of labyrinth masters, the captives were rescued. Among the prisoners of the labyrinth were also children who were born in it. Children who were deprived of their mothers who lost them during the war were forced to feed on the monster's milk. Monsters were second mothers, and a chance for survival for orphaned children. There's another one on the way. One of the hunters shouted. The children raised in such conditions had supernatural powers that they could hardly be called human. The guard took a closer look and began to say that it seemed to be one of those born in the labyrinth. His companion replied that he was quite late in arriving. The hunters came up to the child and covered him with a blanket and began to say that you are safe now, little one. Be on the lookout. Near the pensive Jin-woo Kim, little Hyunji Kim uttered dungeon child, pointed at him. What were we going to film the second level of the labyrinth? The boy next to her said that the labyrinth was many years old and there was nothing to film. Didn't the dungeon kids become popular because of the media publicity? The boy started talking, and Hyunji agreed with his words. Hyunji, with a small smirk, started to say that she had done a little investigation. She continued and began to ask if he knew how much the dungeon children were obsessed with dungeons. The nearby sitting Jin-woo Kim started talking. As it turned out, this guy is the only child of the dungeon, afraid of the labyrinth. He is the only child with unknown level. Maybe because he is a weakling. Started to ask the boy from these words. Jin-woo Kim took a deep breath. Then Hyunji started to say, and that just in case, took a guard. Then Jin-woo Kim got to his feet and said, what if he actually, after that phrase, he stopped and started saying to continue. He complimented and started saying it was dangerous to stay here and they needed to get to the second floor, and he repeated again to start talking and the guards not to use weapons. We need to avoid clashes at all costs. Jin-woo Kim finished. One of the guards started to ask him if he was too worried about it. The guard added that a child of the dungeon as a child of the Buddha doesn't care. You are only required to guard us, and that we will take care of the children ourselves. After that, Jin-woo Kim thought that they were arrogant fools, and that while they were having this meaningless dialogue, someone in the maze was being torn apart. Jin-woo Kim continued and thought that one should not underestimate the geyser. The little boy with the camera shrieked and started asking what it was. An unknown something began to climb out of the dark cave, growling as it slowly emerged from the darkness. This underground creature is usually found on the first floor of the geyser. He's already wounded. We'd better get out of here before the smell of blood soaks into our clothes. One of the guards started saying, we'll show them what they charge. Then Jin-woo Kim heard it and shouted for them not to shoot, but it was too late. The guard shouted fire, and at the same moment his order came to fruition. The team of hunters, without letting their weapons out of their hands, started firing at the unknown monster. The monster roared and wriggled in pain. Its roar was so loud that the guards covered their ears with their hands to keep from going deaf. After such a skirmish, the monster fell and the cave became silent, and everyone froze in fear. Everyone looked at the breathless body of the wild monster with fright and confusion. All covered in sweat and laughed nervously without taking their eyes off the monster. One of the guards began to speak. Everyone in the cave began to discuss the situation heatedly, except for Jin-woo Kim, who stood quietly watching. Then Jin-woo Kim started to say that he should pack his things and return immediately, and was asked by one of the guards if he was scared. In an instant, the loud roar of an unknown beast silenced everyone for a moment. The guard started to ask what it was, to which Jin-woo Kim replied that the predator had heard the shots, but he was still far away, so he could still get away. One of the guards confidently began to say that they would send him to the other side of the world, and Jin-woo Kim froze in bewilderment. The guards began to discuss a plan on how they could kill the next monster, and all they were interested in was how much their work would cost. If we kill a few of these things, each of us will earn several tens of millions, the guard reasoned. Money is idiots again, Jin-woo thought to himself. The guard, whose clothes were stained with blood, suddenly froze. Jin-woo Kim looked disappointedly at this sad picture of mercantile and stupid people. He started to say that it's up to you, but we are staying here. The guards laughed and started to make fun of his words, thinking that Jin-woo Kim had surrendered. With a cold expression on his face, Jin-woo Kim started telling the children to follow him. They tried to object, saying they had to take pictures. Behind me, Jin-woo Kim said loudly and gravely, with a blank look at the children. The guard, with a smirk, began to say that we would soon see a group of people who were going deeper into the cave. Jin-woo Kim and his team then rushed and ran away from that place as fast as possible. After a while, they stopped and exhaled with a puff of relief. Hyunji then started asking where they were going, and indignantly started saying that he had screwed up the whole shoot and didn't whine, and Jinwoo Kim replied. After a short pause, he continued and started saying that they were leaving here. With a puzzled expression, Hyunji loudly began to ask what. She continued and excitedly began to speak, but they had agreed. After realizing the situation, she said, "Wait, you mean Hyunji realized that the reason why the dungeon child was bypassing the labyrinth was because..." She looked at Jinwoo Kim, and the answer immediately flashed through her mind, because he's a coward. Hyunji then began to explain to the boy that he had to go back to film the fight. She reminded the boy that they had spent a lot of money to go here, and if they stayed here, her speech was interrupted by a sharp sound. Everyone looked in bewilderment and consternation, and looked sharply in the direction from whence the sounds came. From the depths of the dark cave came horrible and loud sounds, similar to growls. The sounds from the depths of the cave were getting louder and louder, and it was slowly getting more and more frightening to the boys. Hyunji, along with her buddy, became very frightened and shrieked at the same time. After that, Jinwoo Kim started telling them to shut up and follow him. He added that they couldn't let them know that their group had split up. Hyunji got scared and started asking what was going on. He started to say that the predators heard the shots, and that the one they killed was their prey. The boy pointed the camera at Jinwoo Kim and started filming. Hyunji started to ask if you'd just let them die knowing that, and he replied that if he tried to convince them, they'd all be dead long ago. Jinwoo Kim supplemented his answer by saying that the blood had gotten on their clothes and they were already doomed to die from the start. But still, if we were hopeful, Hyunji shouted, but she was interrupted by Jinwoo Kim, telling her to calm down. The boy noticed that there were drops of blood on his shoes, and he sharply pointed the camera straight at them. He zoomed in on his shoes, and everything shook violently around him, but Hyunji in the background was still trying to calm down and pondered nervously. The boy shook and flipped the camera around to catch everything that was happening. In the camera lens, he saw a huge monster, something like a huge monkey with red eyes. After a moment, the monster's toothy maw approached the boy, and he put his arm out in front of him to defend himself. Hyunji and Jinwoo Kim turned around at the sound of the falling camera and saw a horrible monster standing in front of them. They saw that in the monster's mouth was a boy who just 5 minutes ago was running merrily through the maze and filming everything. The last thing the boy managed to utter before he was bitten by the monster's fangs was the single word, "save." Jinwoo Kim, puzzled at what the wolf monkey was doing on the first floor, froze in horror as at the same time Hyunji screamed loudly at what she saw. Then, from nowhere, there were some unfamiliar and strange sounds that made Jinwoo Kim tense, and he slowly turned around. He saw that the big monster was joined by his comrades, and from that, he began to say that we were trapped, and that they were following us. Jinwoo Kim saw that one of the monsters started to approach Hyunji, and he became furious, and blue lightning flashed in his eyes. Without the slightest doubt, he tore out of his seat and ran to Hyunji's aid. The guy pulled his sword out of the pouch with a sharp movement of his hand and glared at the wolf ape with all the anger he could muster. The huge paw of the wolf monkey came closer and closer to our hero. After that, Jinwoo Kim instantly, and without slowing down, he searched for the monster's vulnerabilities. The guy jumped up, and with one precise sword motion, he sliced the monster's head into 2 pieces. After his precise swing, the guy turned around and saw that another wolf monkey was approaching Hyunji. As the crying girl held the camera of her dead friend in her hands, the monster behind her swung around and was ready to crush her. Jinwoo Kim launched his sword straight at the monster's head, blinding it. At that moment, while the monster was in pain, the guy grabbed Hyunji and warned her that he would now run with all his might. "You might break a couple ribs, so get ready to supplement Jinwoo Kim." He rushed with all his might as fast as he could to escape and get away from the monsters. The one-eyed monster came to his senses and noticed that his would-be prey had escaped them. The monsters became furious and began to howl loudly and beat their chests at having missed their prey. When Jinwoo Kim and Hyunji got away from the monsters, they decided to take a break, and the guy put the crying girl on the ground. He started to say that they seemed to have broken away, and the fact that Hyunji was holding up well complimented him, and he started to say that they weren't far away and needed to hurry. "They left this world because of you," Hyunji started to say in bewilderment. Jinwoo Kim started to ask the girl what she meant. She started saying that he could have killed them all, and questioned why he didn't. Jinwoo Kim then began to answer the crying girl's question that she apparently wasn't catching on. "I'm a chaperone, not your guard," the guy added. Did the contract say that I have to go into battle? Jinwoo Kim started to say, but people died, the girl replied. This geyser dryly replied, Jinwoo Kim, to a crying Hyunji and complimented. You hired a bunch of arrogant people who never came down here. You ignored my warnings, so why is it my fault? If you spoiled cretins had listened to me from the start, could have survived, we wouldn't have even met them. Or I was wrong. A crying Hyunji started asking him why he saved me. Jinwoo Kim then told her that if she died, he wouldn't get his money. I'm just doing my job, and you're paying me to do it. That's the end of my answer. Jinwoo Kim started to say that he would protect her until then, but his speech was halted by a bright flame that suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Hyunji and Jinwoo Kim froze in their seats at the sight they had taken away. A huge door with a labyrinth emblem appeared in front of them. The emblem resembled a snake that wrapped a sword around its body. Then Jinwoo Kim froze in place and opened his eyes wide and began to say that this was the entrance to the labyrinth. It slipped into his mind that they had to get out of here, and immediately afterward, the ground beneath their feet began to crack. In an instant, the ground began to collapse and move out from under their feet. Jinwoo Kim and Hyunji. Kim looked at the ground vaporizing under their feet and shouted at the same time. With a loud scream, our heroes fell into the depths of dark and uncharted caverns. The guy came to his senses, and out of fright, he opened his eyes abruptly in confusion as to where he was. The exhausted Jinwoo Kim leaned on his arm and sat on the ground, sighing heavily. The guy touched his hand to his forearm and looked at it. After a moment, Jinwoo felt a strong pain in that spot. Accepting the situation, the guy sighed, saying it could have been worse. After looking around and seeing the aftermath of their fall, Jinwoo began to say that his money was crying. Accepting the situation of losing money, the guy looked at the entrance to the maze and froze. After assessing the situation and what had just happened, the guy realized he was in big trouble now. The guy decided not to waste time and continue on his way to get out of here as soon as possible. Then the guy's attention was drawn away by a sharp, unknown sound, and he decided to turn around. Angry Jinwoo looked angrily at the source of the noise and noticed that it was coming from the door. The eyes of the snake on the door lit up white, and the hissing sounds grew louder and louder. Then the snake came to life, and in an instant, it coiled around Jinwoo and opened its mouth before him. The snake showed its sharp big fangs and bit Jinwoo Kim's arm. The guy was horrified by what he saw, and you could see the fear in his eyes. After what he saw, he felt weak, and his eyes began to close, little by little. The exhausted guy's eyes began to close from the snake bite, and he fainted. After a while, the guy woke up startled and looked around to see where he was. Gathering all the strength in his fist, Jinwoo Kim tried to get up to sit down. In confusion of what had just happened to him, he examined his hands and realized that his power was gone. Clenching his hand into a fist, the guy realized there was nothing he could do about it. Accepting the situation, Jinwoo Kim looked at his hands once more in bewilderment. Finding himself in an awkward position, he got up and stood thereby, continuing on his way. Walking, Jinwoo Kim noticed a girl lying on the ground and immediately rushed over to her. The guy realized that this girl was Hyunji Kim, and he ran up to her without slowing down. Despite all the severe injuries Hyunji Kim sustained in the fall, she was still alive. There were no medicines or people around here. No one would be able to help the injured Hyunji. The exhausted girl lying on her arms began to cough black liquid, which alerted the guy. The guy wordlessly took Hyunji on his back with the thoughts that there was no time to think and that she could leave this world at any moment. The guy started asking Hyunji to hold out a little longer since they were almost out of there. After so many adventures in the Jinwoo caves, Kim found himself at home. The TV was on in the house, and they were saying that there had been an accident with an expedition team around 9 o'clock this morning. 7 of the 9 died. The monsters attacked, destroying the entire fighting force of the squad. The surviving Miss Jang was rescued by the child of the dungeon, Mr. Kim, 2 hours later, and the reporters have already given everything to the television, the guy thought. It's a good thing they recorded it on camera. I thought they would have blamed me for everything, Jinwoo Kim thought. I'd hate to pay a fine for a bunch of inexperienced and frivolous people. I left some of my paycheck in Hyunji's room, hoping she noticed after Jinwoo Kim, and added that it's been a rough couple of days. A disappointed Hyunji walked into the room, and Jinwoo Kim was pleasantly surprised that she was home. The guy started to ask Hyunji what happened to her and if she cried, but the girl kept silent, holding the envelope in her hands. After that, Jinwoo Kim was confused, and he looked at Hyunji confused and scared. He thought that she had just seen the money, and that it was a huge amount for her, and that's why he was scared. Jinwoo Kim held out another envelope to the girl. telling her to take it because she would need it later, and started asking her not to ask where the money came from. From the back, their father walked up to Hyunji and tears came to her eyes. With a serious and stern face, he started asking the guy what it all meant. With a slight smile, Jinwoo asked his father if he had a day off today, and his father replied that he was an ill-mannered boy. The father went on to say that he had heard that he had gone to earn money at the risk of his life. He went on and started saying that was the reason he quit his job and came home. Father yelled at Hyunji, saying that he told her to give the money back, and he doesn't understand why she still has it. Upon completing, he began to ask what she was to do and told her to return that money to her brother. The man began to ask what he thought they were so useless that he decided to risk his life for money. He replied that nothing bad had happened to him and that he had just made a lot of money. The father started to say that it was enough. The father said he knew they weren't blood relatives, but he underestimated him a lot, and he started asking if the guy thought he wouldn't find out. The boy lowered his head in shame and started to apologize for his act. Hyunji, with her head down, held out the envelope of money to her brother saying, "Take it." You could see the frustration of the whole situation on the girl's face. Taking the envelope with the money and giving her name after that, she started to be silent and left the room. His father started saying that he thought he'd raised him properly, but he'd grown up selfish. He added that he knew it was not an easy task to raise a child. Jinwoo Kim said that he wanted to give the money to his sister because he had nowhere to spend it. The man replied that if she knew what he had gotten the money for, she would never accept it. Turning away from his son, he continued his speech, telling him not to forget that he was also a member of the family. He told his son to go to rest and asked him to promise not to do it again, to which Jinwoo Kim agreed. If you take it upon yourself to raise a dungeon child, you get a decent amount of money. There were many cases when a child was taken into a family just for their sake, because of which such children often sent their guardians to the grave. The guy thinks he's very lucky to have a real family. Now, because of Hyunji's wedding, Jinwoo Kim's family is having a hard time, but it's nothing. As Jinwoo entered the room, he looked at his hand suspiciously. The guy pulled down his sleeve and noticed that he had a tattoo of a snake on his arm. Touching his tattooed wrist with his hand, it began to glow, and the guy thought the tattoo was not simple. Suddenly, in front of Jinwoo, Kim appeared a green panel with characteristics in the shape of a snake. The guy was puzzled and at a loss as to what it was. By surfing the internet, the guy was able to find a smattering of information about this green panel. This green panel looks like the one often seen in games, making the conclusion the guy thought about the fact that the abandoned labyrinth had chosen him as the new master. Jinwoo Kim approached the magic green panel and said that games have that too. The guy decided to touch the panel, and everything around him was covered in huge cracks. A moment later, the guy woke up and found himself in some unknown place, sitting on the floor. In front of the guy was that door with the snake again, and the thought popped into his head again with the question, again this place. The guy realized that it wasn't this location different, and he had hit some other place. Jinwoo Kim was wary because he heard the familiar sounds again and looked at the door. Suddenly, the snake on the door once again glowed and shimmered with a blue-white color. It's so fast that I can't even keep up with it, so I have to use all my strength, Jinwoo Kim thought. The boy took off his cloak and used it to try and tame the swift snake. In one swift and deft movement, the snake was caught and returned to its place. Jinwoo Kim looked at the snake covered by his cloak and began to ask if she was thinking about whether he would fall for her trick. He figured it would only hold her back for a little while, and she'd have enough strength to get out of her clothes without a problem, so he'd need a weapon. The boy's musings were interrupted by a strange sound coming from the door. Snake began to say that Jinwoo Kim is too young unfit to take on the burden of the crown, and she is unable to turn back time. The guy didn't understand what she was talking about, and started asking her if she was the master of the labyrinth, to which the snake replied that the king had fallen. Long live the king, she added. Snake wished Jinwoo Kim good luck with the difficult ruling, and the guy just started asking her to explain what was going on. After that, Jinwoo Kim tried to shout to the snake, but all his attempts were unsuccessful. He started telling the snake not to play with him and that he wasn't going back to that place. Because of this, Jinwoo Kim had avoided the labyrinth for years, but he had to come down here for money for Henji's wedding. He didn't understand why trouble was following him. The guy started saying that he should have listened to his parents' advice and avoided those mazes. An unfamiliar little silhouette ran not far from the boy, causing him to turn around to see what was there. A moment later, Jinwoo Kim heard Hyunji calling him, and he went to look for the source of the sound. Hyunji started asking his brother if they could talk, to which Jinwoo Kim replied that he was changing his clothes. The guy discovered the portal through which he got to this place, and he realized that sounds from the outside world were coming through it. The girl took hold of the doorknob and began to say she was entering the room, to which he replied that she should not do so. With anger on his face, he realized there was no turning back, and his sister was going to come into his room anyway. After gathering his courage, the boy stepped through the portal and into his room. Jinwoo Kim felt like his body was being torn apart, but he was fine. Hyunji opened the door and started asking her brother what that sound was. She complimented and started asking why he was sweating and in street clothes. The phrase legendary was heard from her brother's laptop, and Hyunji thought her brother was playing something. The girl started asking the guy if he was playing and tried to break into the room, to which the brother replied that it was a stream. Hyunji started to say that she never thought her ever-so-secretive brother would be interested in such things. His sister added that he has no hobbies, no friends, no girlfriend, and that he sits here in four walls 24 hours a day. In private, Jinwoo Kim agreed with his sister's words, because after he left the labyrinth, he tried his best to forget this place. The boy wasn't used to such peace, but it made him uncomfortable. He thought that was the reason why the dungeon children were so drawn to the labyrinth. Still at the door, he began to ask his sister what she wanted from him. Hyunji lowered her gaze and stammered without uttering a single word. The silence broke, and the sister began to ask Jinwoo for forgiveness. She said she didn't know that he had come back to that place because of her, and she was really sorry, and she was relieved to hear what had happened. The guy started to tell Hyunji not to worry because everything was fine, but then Jinwoo Kim suddenly interrupted. He told Hyunji to wait outside the door, saying he'd be right back, remembering that he'd left his coat in the maze. In the portal, he saw what some monster was getting close to the snake that was rolled up in his coat. The monster took the coat off the snake and took it with him while chuckling and smiling evilly. After that, Jinwoo Kim was greatly surprised at this sight and froze in bewilderment as he continued to watch this situation. Disappointed at the loss of the money that was in that very coat, he continued to watch the scene. Kim looked at his sister Jinwoo and started talking, saying that everything was fine and that she didn't have to worry about him, but he excused himself by saying that he was so absorbed in the game that he had forgotten about yesterday. The guy continued and started asking his sister if she would mind if he played sometimes, to which Hyunji replied that she didn't mind. After her reply, Jinwoo slammed the door while thanking her. The girl stood confused and very much surprised at what was happening. Hyunji started to say that she had never seen him so enthusiastic. At this time, the guy stood under the door and mentally started to apologize to his sister and closed the door. Jinwoo Kim then entered the portal again to retrieve his coat and return the money. The boy saw his coat near the throne and without too much delay rushed to it. He started to grab his coat, looked around, and started to say that it seems that the monster was gone. Jinwoo Kim began to look in his pockets and everything but the money was there. In front of the guy appeared the same green banner that said that while he was outside the maze, the devil had stolen all his money. The guy was furious and wondering why the devil needed his money, and then he calmed down and stood still. Jinwoo Kim was furious, and it made him throw his coat to the ground and sit on his throne. He rubbed the bridge of his nose and squeezed his eyes shut, wondering how it had all come to this. Accidentally putting his hand on one of the armrests of the throne and touched the sphere at that moment, several panels appeared in front of the guy's eyes. The guy started saying that this sphere seemed to work the same way as the tattoo on his arm. After this happened, Jinwoo Kim accepted the situation, took a deep breath, and began to say that he would synchronize because he would not leave here without money. The guy started saying that if it wasn't for them, he wouldn't be here and he didn't care what happened to the maze. Then he rejoined the banner. He looked at the banner without interest and smirked a little because some kind of download had started on the screen. The guy was puzzled by what was happening, and he didn't understand what was going on because he remembered exactly that he pressed the button after which the gate should have appeared. After that, Jinwoo Kim continued and started saying that he was apparently wasting his time, and it would have been much easier if he had run straight after the devil. When he finished his speech, the banner said that the download was complete, which surprised the guy. Guy saw that the 18,230 snake nest in the Naga labyrinth was registered by Master Kim Jinwoo. At the same moment, he was transported into a huge room. A voice in the background began to say that the labyrinth transformation was beginning according to Labyrinth Master Jinwoo. A new room that was very similar to the one Jinwoo Kim was in before appeared before his eyes. After the synchronization was completed, Jinwoo Kim found himself in a large, beautiful room. The guy looked around and started talking about whether or not the place had been redesigned, even though it was still dark and creepy. Jinwoo Kim thought for a while and began to say that there must be an entrance to the labyrinth somewhere around here, and then he came across a gate. The same devil who stole Jinwoo Kim's coat money was peering out of that gate. Jinwoo Kim heard strange sounds coming from the gate to the labyrinth and became alert. The culprit of these sounds was a devil who wanted to quietly leave, but the guy noticed him. Jinwoo figured that a normal person wouldn't have noticed him and wouldn't have even recognized that someone had walked in from this. The devil was greatly frightened. The angry guy lashed out at the devil, calling him a kleptomaniac. He grabbed the devil by the throat and started choking him, at which the devil tried to break free and wheezed. Angry Jinwoo Kim hit the devil's face with his fist with all his might, and after that, the devil's whole face turned red. Seeing this, Jinwoo Kim started saying that the bold thief dared to return to the scene of the crime. He complimented and started telling him to give him his money back or else he'd tear him to pieces. The devil wheezed and looked fearfully at Jinwoo Kim, and he started asking the devil where his money was. Looking at Jinwoo's hand, the devil was startled and panicked. Then he pulled something out of his clothes. The devil pulled a red-colored gem out of his clothes and held it out to the guy, and Jinwoo Kim still started telling him to give him his money back. The guy looked at the gem and was shocked that it was a deep gem. Deep gems are special stones that can only be found in a geyser. They are deep underground or they can be hidden in plants. However, their extraction is so difficult that people choose to hunt the most dangerous creatures, which is why deep gems are expensive. Even a 1-carat gem is valued at a couple million won, and this gem is the size of a thumb. The guy thought that this precious gem was definitely worth a couple million won. At the same time, the devil continued to wheeze and wriggle while still in the guy's hand. The devil pulled out a second gem from under his clothes, but it was blue in color. The monster couldn't take it anymore, so he tossed the gems and screamed, causing Jinwoo Kim to let him go. Jinwoo Kim tried to grab the 2 gems, but he only managed to grab the red stone, and the blue stone bounced off his hand. While the guy was trying to grab the gems, the devil took advantage of the situation and ran away. Jinwoo Kim saw this and pronounced that he had at least gotten the gems. While the guy was thinking about how the devil had left, the blue gem fell to the floor and shattered, leaving behind a bright white flash. The guy turned around to see what had just happened. After the flash, the green banner reappeared. The banner said that Jinwoo had sacrificed a depth gem, and the damaged part of the maze would be repaired, and because of that, Jinwoo was angry. Out of anger, the guy punched the floor with all his might, but a little later, he cooled down and relaxed. A banner popped up saying that there are 24 hours left to upgrade the persistence, and he has 72 hours to upgrade the maze rank. Jinwoo Kim was upset because he could buy a car with this gem. 4 days later, despite the worries about Hyunji's wedding, thanks to the blessings of people and the generosity of the groom's parents, everything went perfectly. Also, Jinwoo Kim was able to sell the profound gem for a good price, and he sold it for 18 million. Although Jinwoo sold the gem for less than he expected, the money was enough to buy a decent wedding gift. A banner appeared in front of the feather saying that the upgrade was complete, and Jinwoo decided to go there to find out if it was worth it. A portal to the maze opened in front of the guy and he went straight into it. After that, Jinwoo Kim entered the portal and several banners appeared in front of his face, saying that the labyrinth upgrade was complete. Due to the activation of the maze, new types of monsters have been discovered nearby and the maze defense is at a low level. Jinwoo Kim warily looked to the left and saw a huge cloud of dust there. This huge cloud of dust and dirt reached the guy and it made him start coughing. When the cloud of dust disappeared, the guy could not believe his eyes and froze in one place. In the place where the wall had been, a new room appeared. Jinwoo Kim thought that it might be Naga's nest. Then Jinwoo Kim began to say that he had imagined this place differently and hoped that it would be more snake-like and that one egg would hatch. The guy quickly turned around to see what was the cause of that sound. Paws of unknown monsters began to emerge from the nests, and Jinwoo began to say that they were slaves. He didn't understand why newborn monsters were so small and cute at the same time. The panel showed that the slaves were waiting for instructions, and the little monsters surrounded the guy waiting for his further instructions. Jinwoo Kim began to say that he knew very well what slaves were supposed to do because he worked for the government. Looking at the monsters, he began to say that they would be scouts, and at the same time, the monsters watched carefully and listened to what their master was telling them. Then Jinwoo Kim told the monsters to investigate the nearest risk factors, resources ecology, and the rest he reminded that the priority was survival and no fighting. The monsters had gone on a mission, and the guy thought about the fact that he was supposed to go with them, but he didn't have the money to protect them. To the monsters that remained, he told them to dig out the wall opposite the nest and create a vault. Jin-Woo Kim didn't hold out much hope for these monsters because they are small and chubby, and for that reason, they are the perfect prey for the monsters in the geyser. After a while, the guy came to the monsters to see what they had managed to do, and their work impressed him. He didn't think about the fact that the monsters could tackle the wall in just an hour. The banner said that some of the slaves had returned from the exploration, and Jin-Woo was very surprised that only some of them had returned. Only one monster from this entire small group had returned from the scouting mission. Seeing this, Jin-Woo Kim ran to the only surviving monster and began to question him about where the others were. The guy had no idea that slaves were so weak and next to no real monsters. He began to question the slave about everything that had happened, but the little slave only hissed back at him. The slaves were delighted at this interest on the part of the master, and the banner announced that the mood of the workers had been improved and their efficiency increased. The slave held out a mysterious scroll to his master, leaving Jin-Woo Kim puzzled. Jin-Woo Kim was brave enough to unroll the scroll, and it turned out to be a map on a banner that said the map of the maze had been updated. The guy started saying things that he didn't even need to open a map, and there is a lot of proximity to him. He heard strange noises coming from the darkness and began to look into what was going on there. The slave came out of the darkness and dumped everything he had managed to get on the ground, and Jin-Woo Kim began to question whether there was so much loot. He complimented and began to ask if all he had brought was what he could carry, to which the slave nodded affirmatively. Jin-Woo Kim didn't even know if he should thank him for that or if it was better not to. The guy looked at the things and thought about the fact that these things have been here since the Great War, and it's obvious from these things that there have been no people here for a long time. He wondered how deep they were and assumed they were definitely lower than that, but his thought was interrupted by something shiny that spilled out of a paper bag. Jin-Woo Kim started rummaging through his things to find out what was so shiny among the old and shabby things. The guy started picking up these stones, and he was shocked that they turned out to be deep gems. He began to ask the slave how many of these stones he had seen, and he told him to carry them all faster. Jin-Woo Kim added that he should remember to tell this to the other slaves. The guy shouted that it was urgent to appraise these gems and ran off into another world. Suddenly he stopped and thought about what would happen to the slaves if he walked out now. He thought about the fact that the labyrinth might be attacked while he wasn't here. The slaves are very disappointed because Jin-Woo Kim wants to leave them for another world. The boy began to ask the slave if he was sure there were still deep gems here, to which the slave hissed in the affirmative. He looked at the gems and began to say that the labyrinth was good for him in the form of money. After that, Jin-Woo Kim threw all his gems on the ground, and they transformed into maze energy. On the banner, it said that the probability of success was medium. He was stunned that he had just sacrificed millions of won for some probability. The guy had been trying for 5 years to get rid of thoughts of the labyrinth, but once he got here, it completely consumed him. He now understood why the children of the dungeons were so obsessed with them, and why they were willing to lay down their lives for them, even in spite of the danger and the pitch darkness of the geyser. Thinking over everything, Jin-Woo Kim never left the unpleasant feeling while he lived in peace and safety on the surface. The guy remembered how he lived on the surface and was insanely bored. He went on and told his slaves that he would bring King Nagi the glory of his empire. The glory that would spread throughout the geyser obsessively and confidently began to speak. "Come, Naga," exclaimed Jin-Woo Kim, and opened the banners in front of him, and the banners showed all the detailed information about the labyrinth. The guy was dumbfounded that the list of those he could call upon at the moment was so small, and he decided to call upon soldiers to defend the labyrinth. He factored in the cost of maintaining soldiers, and realized that he couldn't conscript an insanely large number of soldiers. Then Jin-Woo Kim began to say that he was calling one soldier and one servant girl for him. In front of the guy appeared a white slit. There was a portal, and the light from it illuminated our hero. A huge guard came out of the portal, and the guy was very surprised at his size. Jin-Woo wondered if the soldiers would have any weapons. As it turned out, this was more than enough. He started telling the guard that he would protect the vault with the employees. Thinking, Jin-Woo Kim evaluated the guard with a look and started to say that judging by his physique, he wasn't that bad. On the banner came the information that the secret of the geyser had been activated, and the fact that he had summoned a Naga heroic rank servant. The guy was puzzled by it. The portal reappeared in the hall, and the entire room was illuminated by a bright flash of white. A beautiful girl in blue robes and with a snake tail emerged from the portal. A banner appeared saying that Dominicana is far superior to Naga's usual maids because she is a faithful counselor and will serve with honor. The servant girl bowed her head to her master, calling him master. The servant girl's voice sounded in Jinwoo Kim's head, and he thought it was some sort of telepathy. Dominicana first asked her master to give her her first order. Thinking Jinwoo Kim was passionately telling his new maid something, and she listened to his every word intently. The guy explained the whole current situation to Dominicana. She tensed up a bit and tried to read Jinwoo Kim's mind. The servant began to ask his master if he had not even finished his training, to which Jinwoo Kim replied that he had. Dominicana initially asked a look at the researched map of the labyrinth, and Jinwoo replied that there was no problem with that. The maid looked at the map and began to say that there were deposits of deep gems nearby. Jinwoo was surprised that she knew how to use maps. The maid offered to look at it with her own eyes, and that she would explain everything along the way, to which Jinwoo Kim agreed. Dominicana began to say, that in the labyrinth there is a cave of stalactites. The walls of the labyrinth are quite thin, so they can be broken. She added that gem deposits are behind the wall, and sometimes gems can be obtained by processing other minerals. Dominicana began to say that even if the plant's gem's small, we can take the flower with us. Geyser plants are quite resilient and do not need care. The maid began to say that she would pick a couple of flowers since they are here. She complimented and began to say that they should guard this area as it belonged to the labyrinth territory. The nearest passages were easy to defend. Jinwoo Kim started asking Dominica what the red areas on the map were, and she said they were areas where there were wild animals. She started to say that this area with monsters could be considered a hunting zone to be able to draft more soldiers. After a while, Jinwoo Kim started to ask the maid if it's true that her name is Dominicana. She said it's absolutely true, and the guy started to say it's unbelievable. Dominicana started to say that this is the minimum set of knowledge for maids who help run the labyrinth, and the guy started telling her not to be modest. Hearing all this, Jinwoo Kim didn't realize that there might be someone here to talk to. He began to tell Dominique that he had come here from the upper world, and he had no intention of abandoning the labyrinth, but he would be here very often on the surface. Dominique sighed and began to say that she understood his concern perfectly. She complimented and began to say that since the maze has no core, monsters won't be coming here anytime soon, but you can expect anything from the geyser. Dominicana recommended calling more soldiers and maids before it's too late, and we need to collect as many depth gems as possible. Then, Jinwoo Kim began to ask if she could help with this, to which she replied that releasing energy from gems can only be done by a master. The guy started telling Dominica that he had one last question for her. He started asking what would happen if he didn't meet their standards. Dominicana replied that some Nagas might leave or rebel, but even if the monster harmed the owner of the labyrinth, they could never take over the labyrinth. Only those who chose the labyrinth can own it, and still choose to add a servant. The Nagi are not foolish enough to overthrow the power of the labyrinth, whose fame will be spread throughout the geyser. Jinwoo Kim looked at Dominica and sighed with relief, saying like that. The guy started to say that they had a lot of work to do and needed to stop talking, as well as he started to say that he was glad to meet her, which was reciprocated by the maid. Jinwoo walked into the shop, and the shopkeeper was happy about it. He looked at the deep gems that the guy gave him, and he started asking where he got them from. The shopkeeper began to say that it was very difficult to get such gems, and that the wolf monkeys had moved from the 8th level to the 1st. The shopkeeper added that in the last 5 years, the professionalism of researchers has declined, due to which the supply of deep gemstones has fallen sharply. The man continued and started saying he wasn't going to ask the guy where he was getting them from, but he wanted a contract, and clarified that he wasn't going to sit on his neck. The thing is, Jinwoo Kim has been living away from the geyser for a long time, and he doesn't know what the situation is like there now, so he could learn more about the labyrinth by agreeing to the terms. The guy agreed, but his condition was information about the labyrinth. The shopkeeper started saying that it was not difficult, especially for such lovely stones. The shopkeeper started to say, since they had an agreement, he was giving him information. If the guy didn't agree, he could throw him a job. The old man started asking the guy if he had ever heard of hell spiders. He began to say that hell spiders are hard to deal with, but each one has a deep gem. If you kill even one, you can get a huge amount of money. The shopkeeper started to say that they live at the Paju Gate, and Jinwoo Kim started to say that he wouldn't take it. The old man, puzzled by the guy's answer, began to ask if he was willing to give up that kind of money. The shopkeeper started to say that you have a family to take care of, and he heard that they are not doing well. After hearing this, Jinwoo was furious. The guy, in a fit of rage, broke the table with a sharp movement of his hand and started asking the shopkeeper if he was digging for him. The shopkeeper at first asked the guy to calm down and listen to him saying that he would work with the strongest children of the dungeon. He complimented that they didn't have as soft a temper as he did, and also began to say that he was responsible for the unknowingly obtained materials, especially for his gems. Except for his first gem, since its quality was excellent, Jinwoo Kim began to say that he mined these gems with his own hands. The old man began to say that many people here have had a hard life. Many have lost parents, brothers and sisters who have fallen by the sword. 400. The shopkeeper disappointedly added that it's hard to trust loners who have nothing to lose in life and can't take responsibility for someone else. He started saying that Jinwoo has his own family that he wants to protect. Jinwoo Kim began to say that if he laid a finger on his family, he would suffer a wrath he couldn't even imagine. The old man started to say that he understood everything and it won't happen again. He said that he seemed to have sacrificed his trust to make sure of yours. The guy standing at the door began to say that he was off and to have the shopkeeper send him the money for the gems to his account, and the old man replied, okay. After that moment, Jinwoo Kim slammed the door behind him and left, leaving the old man alone in the office. The old man didn't even mention the table and started saying it was all the damn dungeon children. The child of the dungeon looked scared and confused at everything that was going on around him, and in the background, someone started telling him to run away. The children of the dungeon ran in terror, hoping to escape the hellish spiders. A hell spider stuck its paw into one of the dungeon children, and he began to ask why, because they had worked all their lives for the labyrinth. A huge army of hell spiders swooped down on the poor children and struck one by one. It turned out to be a nightmare, and Jinwoo Kim woke up in a sweat and thought that luckily it was just a nightmare. Dominicana heard strange noises and rushed to her master while being very frightened for her master. The maid started to ask Jinwoo Kim if he was okay, but he just said her name to let her know that he was okay. The guy started saying that he had a dream from the past, and he started saying that he was fine and not to worry about him, it was all a thing of the past. The maidservant and slaves surrounded the lad in bewilderment at what had happened. Jinwoo Kim then laughed awkwardly at the sight of their faces and started telling the maid that it was all right. The guy started to say that he was just surprised at how different they were from other creatures. The maid started to say, if you don't like it, but Jinwoo interrupted her and said that he wasn't embarrassed because he was born and raised in the labyrinth. Though, if you think about it, it's because they're not like the usual labyrinth dwellers, and he's not as nervous being here. Then Jinwoo began to say that there are wild spiders not so far from here, and it is good that we are far away from each other, but the creatures from the others may come here. The guy started asking Dominica how much more time was left before the update, and she said 3 more seconds. Dominique complimented before the maze rises to the 3rd rank, and Jinwoo Kim started to interrupt her asking what. Several banners appeared in front of the guy saying that the upgrade to rank 3 was complete, and now there were many new additions. In the center of the room appeared the heart of the labyrinth, or as it is called, the core of the labyrinth. The servant began to speak, and if it is destroyed, the labyrinth will be deactivated. The maid went on to say that the labyrinth has power limits, and from time to time, things will appear in it that increase the power of the portal. Dominicana continued and began to say that during the destruction of the labyrinth, in case the core was destroyed, if he managed to survive, he could rebuild it. In front of Jinwoo Kim, banners popped up that said that due to the activation of the core, the nearest monsters had learned of the existence of the labyrinth. In an hour, the horned rats were going to attack the labyrinth, and Jinwoo started telling Dominique that they were under attack and needed to increase the number of troops. Then Jinwoo Kim had never heard of horned rats. Then he walked over to the core and started saying what Nagi was calling for. A banner appeared in front of the guy, displaying more classes than there were before Jinwoo didn't think that it consumed so much energy to summon. After that, Jinwoo was low on crystals and wanted to bet everything on the soldiers, but the maid stopped him saying that 1 soldier could handle 4 rats. Dominicana continued and began to say that a warrior or priest is equal to 2 soldiers. An archer is equal to 3 soldiers, the servant continued. She finished her explanation by saying that 1 mage is equal in strength to as many as 5 rats. In conclusion, she began to say, however, all but warrior lacks skill in close combat and needs to be more cautious, and Jinwoo praised for the good advice. After this incident, Jinwoo praised the heavens for sending him her, and in Dominique's eyes, you could see the joy and delight in his words. He summoned 1 soldier and 2 Naga warriors to fight the horned rats. Several portals appeared from which Naga warriors and soldiers began to emerge. Jinwoo Kim was very happy to have a new addition to his ranks. The majestic warriors stood in front of the guy, and a banner appeared on the banner saying that a Naga soldier and a Naga warrior had been summoned. Realizing this, Jinwoo Kim began to say that they had exceeded his expectations, and with them, they could compete with the wolf monkeys. One of the slaves heard this, and it upset him very much. After that, Jinwoo Kim started asking him something wrong, and the maid looked awkwardly at the upset slave. The acolyte began to say that Naga workers are the consequences of mutating high-ranking Naga. The stronger the Naga, the more likely the feat is to be born. This kid is looking at a version of what he could have become, but will never have the opportunity to become. After seeing that, Jinwoo started to say, so this little guy continues to follow orders, but looks a bit sluggish, and he clearly lacks willpower. The guy didn't understand if he had more strength than the others, so why didn't he notice the difference in speed? The maid started to say that he should be taught a lesson, but Jinwoo Kim started to say no need. Jinwoo Kim ordered all the slaves to report to him, even those who had just appeared. He started telling Dominicana not to worry, and started saying that he wasn't sending them into battle, but they were going on a tour. The guy was talking to Dominicana and started saying that according to her, the homage, and this is their first battle in the maze, so it would be very cruel to hide them at a time like this. Jinwoo Kim began to say that he would make sure they were not in danger, and that he would protect them by any means necessary. The guy started asking himself, so what about weapons for the approaching battle? He picked up his pickaxe, and with a smile on his face began to contemplate what weapon he should take. Jinwoo looked at the slave and began to say that what was needed was something small, yet weightless, warrior weapon. When all the warriors were assembled and manned, then Jinwoo Kim raised his pickaxe and began to speak, and now Nagi forward. He started telling those rats, who dared to encroach on their maze, to regret that decision. Meanwhile, the horned rats had found the cave and were ready to attack. The horned rats saw the three slaves in the distance of the caves and thought the new maze master had gone mad. The rats praised their leader because the more horns a rat had, the more intelligent and powerful it was considered to be. The rat with the biggest horn claimed to be the smartest and strongest, and that he would soon exterminate all the snakes. The horned rats, inspired by their leader's speech, cheered at his remarks. The smartest horned rat started saying, and that they wouldn't run away, and they would finally become predators. The cleverest rat began to speak, and all moved to attack, and the warrior, obeying the commander's orders, rushed to the attack. Trench ordered the horned rats to send all the snakes to the other side of the world. The slaves watched the whole picture, and were very frightened, because the horned rats were getting closer and closer. One of the rats jumped up, swinging its sword, and was ready to cut off the head of the snake slave. After that, Jinwoo jumped out from under the corner and struck one of the horned rats with his sword. The guy called all his slaves for help and told them to show them all what they were worth, and he started telling his warriors to send every horny rat to the other side. The horned rats realized it was a trap and started to panic, but it was too late. In the midst of the battle, Trench's master moved him in to go to work. The smartest rat started saying that he called him in while he was on the job for idle chit-chat, and now Trench is going to keep digging. Trench started saying that he would be eaten if he stopped working, because the owners are big and strong and Trench is small and has to work. The man in the cape started to say that he thought Trench was the strongest here, but he seemed to be mistaken. He began to speak, and that would tell him, and the other rats would be able to attain their owner's power. Trench started to ask her if it was true, and the man in the trench coat said of course. The mysterious stranger started talking, and who knows, maybe he could become the owner of the labyrinth too. Trench felt back on the battlefield, and still had no way to get away from this strange situation. In the meantime, the horned rats continued the fight and panicked that Trench had stopped giving them clear instructions. One of the horned rats noticed the blue pearl they had been told about. Trench, fighting his way through the crowd, tells the warriors that if he swallows this pearl, he will become stronger and protect everyone. Trench ran straight to the pearl with the words that they could beat them. The smartest rat told everyone to protect it so he could get to the pearl. Trench thought about how they would be treated differently and how they would no longer bow their heads and not have to pretend everything was okay when their brothers were being eaten. The smartest crying rat ran with all his legs to the coveted pearl. Dominicana became concerned about the situation and called out to her master. After that, Jinwoo Kim was not happy about it, as he was completely immersed in the battle. The boy first asked to borrow a spear from one of the warriors, to which the warrior hissed affirmatively. Trench took a big jump and started saying that he would soon be able to get revenge on the owners. Jinwoo Kim jumped up with all his might and launched his spear at Trench, and it pierced through him. A huge cloud of dust appeared where the spear had fallen, and a banner appeared in front of Jinwoo, informing him that the altar had been damaged. From his last strength, Trench reached for the coveted pearl to save his brothers. After that Jinwoo Kim removed the horned rat obstacle with his pickaxe. The boy began to ask the maid if these rats could eat the pearl, but her answer was no, because their teeth are too weak for that. He didn't think about the fact that he would sacrifice his comrades to break through from this. Jinwoo made a point of being ever vigilant. Dominicana started to say that she should return the spear, to which Jinwoo replied that she didn't need to do that. After that, Jinwoo Kim realized that this rat was their leader, and so the warriors had lost their morale, and because of that, victory was only a matter of time. If the guy had known about how weak their enemies were, he wouldn't have worried so much, Dominicana started to say, and that they could take a number, but they are no stronger than normal workers. Jinwoo Kim started to ask what kind of employees they were, and she said that they were the creatures that were left in the labyrinth and made to work. The guy got nervous because it directly reminded him of the dungeon children during, and it's horrible. Jinwoo Kim canceled out Nagi, and he started saying that they performed well. Jinwoo didn't understand the huge bodies of the guards could move so smoothly and without legs. He assumed it was all because of the tail and center of gravity. Dominicana smiled and mimed coughing sounds to get the guy's attention. Rikshasha began to say that by analyzing the Naga's force level, the following can be summarized: that 1 heroic rank and 4 standard level soldiers. He supplemented by saying that it was likely that their owner was very inexperienced. He had watched him rush to summon units when the invasion had just begun. Anactus began to ask the cloaked Rikshasha what he had sent 20 soldiers to do and could only find out. Rikshasha apologized to Anactus in return, hearing from him that he didn't care about this and needed to gather more rats. Anactus began to ask what about the mercenaries, and Rikshasha replied that they were doing enslavement work outside the labyrinth. Anactus told her to tell them that as soon as they returned, they would prepare for war, and Rakashana began to ask if it was worth sending ordinary workers to war. He replied that someone claimed to be a dragon descendant. He started to say even if he only had ancient blood, he would still be able to take care of the labyrinth. Anactus continued his speech by saying that they were in for an interesting spectacle. The banner revealed that Jinwoo Kim won the novice title after the fight, and Dominican congratulated him on the occasion. Dominica started asking her master if something was wrong, to which Jinwoo Kim replied that a lot of things were wrong. Thinking, Jinwoo started to say that a rat leader had snuck into the owner's room. If he wasn't interested in the core, then they would have gotten hurt. The guy started to say that he was glad that the first opponents were them. He thought that if the situation in the geyser did not change, they would be blown to bits. After the words said by the guy, Dominicana cried because she was touched that he was worried about them first and foremost and not the core. Then Jinwoo Kim thought that they needed a solid defense. He started to tell Nagi that let this triumph remain in their hearts forever. He began to say that they were in a geyser, in a place where the weak die and the strongest survive, and that they had no time to celebrate victory over weak enemies. The guy started to say that at the moment the Naga maze is very weak, but after a short pause, he started to say, however, that they will do the impossible. He began to say that the vaults would overflow with treasures, and they would have new territories, and this place would become their fortress and pride. The fortress that they would create themselves, shouted Jinwoo to his slaves and warriors. Jinwoo looked at his slaves with pride and a smile, and began to say that legends would be written about them. Many days passed after the battle with the horned rats. Their bodies went for food, and their weapons into storage. Jinwoo sent slaves to the cave to set up gem mining equipment, and he sent Dominica along with them. And the rest of the workers, along with the guards, were ordered to mine gems and plant deposits. Jinwoo Kim thought about it. In the future, he wanted to create 2 units, hunters and patrolmen. But now, he lacks the gems for the summoning, and so he went to the shopkeeper. The shopkeeper was surprised when Jinwoo brought him the rat horns. He started to say that these things are always hiding or running away, so it's hard to find them, and finally he praised the guy. Jinwoo began to ask if he could sell these horns, to which the shopkeeper replied that anything from the dungeon could be sold, since these things are used in everyday life. The shopkeeper began to say that he was more interested in deep gems because they were hard to find lately. He complimented by asking if that was all for today, and in response, hearing silence, he began to say that he would transfer the money to his account. The shopkeeper started asking the guy if he was interested in anything else, and he said he was interested in the hell spiders he was talking about, and he started asking if the offer was still on the table. And the old man began to ask if he was upset that he was missing such a chance, and Jinwoo began to say that he just wanted the gems. The shopkeeper started to ask why he needed them, and he said it was to sell them. The old man put on his glasses. That last time he broke the table because he didn't want to agree to it. After thinking about it, he started to say that he thought that money solves everything. He started to say that the first team had already left, and if he wanted to join, he would have to join the main squad. The shopkeeper started asking the guy what his level was, and the guy started asking, didn't he realize it when he broke the table? The old man got angry and started asking how long he was going to keep him in the dark, and the guy started saying he didn't know his level. Then Jinwoo Kim started saying that he was born on the 12th level, but the old man didn't believe it and started telling him not to joke around like that. The shopkeeper worriedly began to say that it turns out that Jinwoo is the child of the highest level dungeon. Jinwoo didn't understand why the old man was making such a fuss over some level, and he started to ask the guy if he was laughing. The guy started saying that he knew nothing about the current situation with the geyser, and the shopkeeper realized why he needed that information. The shopkeeper scratched at the rat's horns and said he would now try to explain the situation in a nutshell. Every child of the dungeon gains a level after birth, and the higher the level, the stronger the child is. First through third upper tier are usually a bit stronger than an adult, and so they are often taken on expeditionary squads. From the 4th to the 6th live the middle levels, and most of them are armed squads, and their strength is comparable to that of super soldiers. 7th through 9th are the lower levels, and they're the territory of monsters, and their strength is appropriate. And on the 10th level, which people couldn't reach during the war, there are very powerful creatures living there. He started saying that there is no information about the lower levels, since the dungeon children from those levels are few. The old man almost forgot to mention that the deeper the level, the higher the chance that a person will have super strength, super speed, and so on. The shopkeeper started asking the guy if he had any super strength and if he could dodge fire and shoot lasers out of his eyes. The guy started saying that even without knowing his weaknesses, he would easily send him to the other side with his bare hands. Jinwoo complimented began to say that the shopkeeper's body is one solid weak spot. The old man was scared for his life and started asking to stop. Meanwhile, the guy started asking if there was room for him. The shopkeeper started to say that if he was level 12 and if they didn't even have room, they would still, and his speech was interrupted. After a while, he continued, "You started to say that you need money. If you lower the level, the reward will be lowered accordingly." The old man started saying that he would give him the schedule and that they would keep him updated, and he would also lend the equipment. He supplemented by starting to say that a dungeon map had to be made for him, and he first asked Jinwoo for his ID and picture. The guy surprisingly started asking the shopkeeper sitting on the phone what the ID was. Meanwhile, Dominicana read an inspirational speech to the little slaves. She spoke of how they would be the stuff of legends, and the little slaves marveled at every word she said. Then Jinwoo Kim saw this sight and started asking the maid what she was doing, and Dominique got embarrassed. Dominicana wanted to explain herself to her master, but he demanded a report first. The servant began to say that the mining in the cave was going well, also a small amount of deep gems they were able to collect from the plants. She began to say that they had managed to collect some more from the wild beasts they had subdued, and Jinwoo began to ask where the gems were. Dominicana bowed her head and held out a few deep gems to the guy. After that, Jinwoo started taking all the gems from the maid and threw them towards the magic stone. A banner appeared, saying that the gems had transformed into maze energy, and Jinwoo began to say that he was summoning Naga. The acolyte was pleasantly surprised that Jinwoo had donated for the good of the labyrinth because they needed it now. Thinking, Jinwoo Kim began to tell Dominica that he would not be in the maze for 2 weeks, and the maid began to ask if she could find out why. Realizing this, Jinwoo started to say that flowers with gems grow very slowly, and every spider carries deep gems, so they will be useful to them. The guy looked at the summoning crystal and started saying it was time to summon an archer. A large green snake monster came out of the portal with a bow in its hands. Jinwoo then told the archer to go to the gate and stand guard with the Naga soldier. He pointed out to the maid that the energy they'd gotten in a couple days was already used up, and Dominicana agreed. The guy said he'd keep 2 more for the maze. Thinking, Jinwoo turned to Dominique, which alerted her, and she looked at her master with incomprehension. He started asking if he could resize the portal he came in through. The following action unfolds near the geyser gate at Pakchu, where a short briefing was held before the start. The girl introduced herself by saying her name was Junyoung and adding that she was the commander of the expedition. Junyoung began to say that for 2 weeks, they would be getting rid of the hell spiders that had invaded the 2nd level, and that their expedition team consisted of 22 people. The mop-up team is 7 people, and the team of normal explorers is 15. The mop-up team is lined up accordingly to their level. Junyoung called out some numbers and started saying, that on his right hand is their number. The girl started to say that the briefing was over, and together with the team she left. One of the soldiers began to tell the expedition team to come in and for them to open the gate. Everyone was surprised that the gate was opening, and they began to watch with interest. Junyoung started to say that considering that they are far away from the first team, they will move quickly. She hopes that they will get there safely. On the way, one of the team members was attacked by a monster, and he wrapped his neck with his tongue. The rest of the team saw this and got serious about the fight. Junyoung started to say that it's a whip lizard and they should watch out for its tail. She proceeded to give orders and started saying for them to strike in the armpit of the front leg. Hyonal started to say that wars have some sort of selection process, and as they see it is useless, and Yeonho replied that it has been 10 years since the war. Hyunil thinks most of them are in debt, and Youngho starts saying that can't be, since they fought well in their time. Yeonho started to say that it doesn't matter if you get raked by the correctors from above or the monsters here, as long as their lives are at stake. The guys were watching Jinwoo Kim / the big whip lizard with his sword, and they started talking, and that it was the 7th level guy that the boss hired. Junyoung was looking at all of this, and you could tell from her look that she was angry about something. The commander began to tell the soldiers to aim for the whip lizard's wounds. The monster was defeated, and Jungyun ordered that they should leave before the smell of blood spreads, and that they should check the monster for gems. Junyoung exhaled with relief and started to tell Jinwoo Kim that he had pretty good skills. She began to say, and that the skin of the whip lizard was quite tough, and that the old man was clearly not wrong about him. Junyoung started to say that he should follow orders next time, and that she realizes that she wants to show off her strength, but they don't want to lose people because of mistakes. Jinwoo Kim started to ask if he had done something wrong, to which the girl replied that no, but as she started to say, and he might break the discipline. Junyoung began to say that a normal person could handle such creatures, but soon they would come across some where they would be powerless. She added, and started to say that if he wasted all the energy, they would have a hard time, to which Jinwoo Kim replied that they shouldn't worry. Jinwoo Kim started to say that he was afraid he was going to get cold, so he decided to move around a bit, and Junyoung replied that, of course. One of the soldiers started telling Junyoung that they were ready to move on, and she started asking how long to go to the safe zone, to which he replied, about an hour. The soldiers started to ask the commander if they would leave the explorers' bodies here, to which Junyoung started to ask if he wanted to bait the monsters this way. After that, Jinwoo Kim thought about how the children of the dungeon and ordinary people were treated differently. If someone left this world, no one would blink an eye. The next action takes place a week later, near the entrance to the 2nd level of the geyser. One of the soldiers began to report to the commander that they had lost 3 fighters. One of the soldiers was surprised that 3 other junior soldiers were injured. The soldiers rejoiced at the deep gems and wondered themselves how many they had managed to get. One of the soldiers started saying that the deep gems are about 5,000, and that's somewhere around 200 gems per person. The guy was not happy that because of some 200 gems, they risked their lives, and he was told that he did not understand anything. The soldier began to say that he had heard that spiders have gems the size of a fist, and also began to say that he had never met such, and he strongly hoped that he would be able to collect a couple of them. And how much we will get for the 2, began to ask the soldier, to what he replied that he was stupid, because everyone will be paid a few thousand. The soldier came to Junyoung, and he started to say that they thought they were catching up with the first squad, but the tracks had gotten too chaotic. He complimented by saying that it felt like there was a battle. Jung-yeon suggested that they had run into spiders. The soldier began to say that the matter is different, because it seems that the traces of the first detachment are everywhere. There was an unknown noise, and then one of the frightened soldiers ran up to the commander, and Junyoung began to ask what the noise was. The soldier started to say that the deep gems started falling from above, and they wanted to pick them up, but the bodies would then get stuck in the air. Junyoung, after seeing that, gave the order for everyone to get ready to fight. A strange source of red light appeared on the ceiling that illuminated the bodies of the people who were suspended from the ceiling with the help of cobwebs. Junyoung started to speak, and what he said was that the footprints were everywhere. The soldier replied that there were only 10 people hanging from the ceiling, and that was only a fraction of them. The commander ordered that it was necessary to retreat quickly and group up, but in the meantime, the cave spider was stealthily approaching her. Someone yelled for Junyoung to turn around because there's something behind her. At this moment, Junyoung's eyes filled with blue light, and she mercilessly struck at the spider. As it turned out, this spider was camouflage. Junyoung began to speak, and the dungeon children to go on the attack, and the explorers to proceed to the bunker. The commander's attention to the fact that the fire was fading, and she gave the order for them to keep the lights on. Someone from the back tried to attack Junyoung, but at that moment, Jinwoo Kim had her back. Their blades merged into one, and they continued this battle against the cave spiders. After thinking it over, Jinwoo Kim shouted to quickly provide fire to fight the spiders. A huge army of giant spiders was heading towards a team made up of dungeon children. One of the spiders began to approach Hyunil, but he was not confused and easily defeated this monster with his sword. Hyunil decided to throw one of the spiders to Young-ho to deal with. Young-ho was only too happy about this, and jumping up with his weapon, he easily dispatched the spider. The breathless body of the spider fell to the ground with a clatter, and one of the dungeon children walked over and started saying that Young-ho's methods were ugly. The guy began mercilessly dealing with one cave spider after another. Another girl, who was also a child of the dungeon, also used her sword to strike, cutting the spiders into pieces. The guy intervened in the girl's fight, and she started asking what's up, to which he replied, while she was sitting white, he had to intervene. The girl pondered on the fact that she would have to fight the spiders in full force, and the soldiers were frightened, saying that they were just spiders. The soldiers started talking, and that they should not forget about the cave spiders on the other side. 640. They were very frightened because they were just ordinary people, but at the same time, they were ready. The brutal battle with the spiders continued and the soldiers fled in terror. But then Jinwoo Kim came to the defense of the ordinary soldiers and destroyed all the spiders with his sword. Jinwoo Kim did not spare his strength in a fit of anger and rage and dealt with the caveman and the spiders one by one. The soldiers were shocked to see the guy fighting skillfully and destroying everyone in his path. Junyoung began to have doubts and started asking herself if this guy was definitely level 7. The brutal battle was over, and the commander gave the order to check the wounded first, and those who were okay, let them check the spiders. Hyun-il started to say that he was finally warmed up, and Young-ho said he thought he'd die of boredom after a whole week of doing nothing. Junyeon began to suspect something, and she thought aloud, saying something that was strange. She began to say that according to the records, spiders live on deeper levels, and they have never climbed that high, so the only records of them are from the war. Hyunil began to ask if she was referring to whether or not they were lightlings. Yunho agreed, and began to say that they even seemed weaker than those lizards. Hyunil suggested that maybe the monsters from the deep levels weren't that strong, and Young-ho suggested the idea that they might be too strong. Junt interrupted them and began to say that it was still thank heavens they didn't have to use explosives. Jinwoo Kim started to say that these are not hell spiders, but they may belong to the same species. He went on to say that hell spiders are much larger than these, and that these spiders don't have an exoskeleton, and the horny layer is very thin. Meanwhile, the guy was sitting there trying to figure out if it was a subspecies or an inferior species, because even the fighting style was very different. Junyoung turned to Jinwoo Kim, but he interrupted her and told them to stop because spiders are very cautious. One of the soldiers started asking why there were so many spider webs, and another soldier started saying that he was a doofus because they were fighting spiders. The soldier began to say that when they arrived it was not there, and he began to ask if it was a spider's web because it was strong. The guy looked away, and he couldn't believe his eyes. Jinwoo started saying that spiders would never make the first move, and that they would wait for their prey. The soldiers saw a strange white consistency on the wall resembling a spider web, and they wondered if they were in the wrong place. Jinwoo Kim then started to interject to Juntae that they had explosives, but the latter replied that they did, but it wasn't useful. The guy started saying it's better to install it on blocked exits and as soon as possible. Young-ho started to ask why this was necessary because the fight was already over, and he heard Hyunil say that he understood because that's what they do in the comics. Hyunil continued and started to say that the strongest monster was hiding somewhere during the whole fight, and then suddenly Jinwoo Kim interrupted him and started to say that his thoughts were correct. Jinwoo Kim then coldly began to say that the hell spiders were hiding somewhere nearby. All the children in the dungeon looked at Jinwoo Kim in bewilderment because they didn't know what they were talking about. Hyunil started to say he was worried for nothing, and Young-ho heaved a sigh of relief and started to ask if that was all he could tell. After Jinwoo Kim started telling the commander that he started telling them who they had just fought, and these monsters were not hell spiders. Junyoung started to ask how he would know if they were definitely hell spiders or not. The girl was furious that how dare some small bug leave a wound on her body. In front of the girl was a huge evil hell spider, and she and her sword were ready to fight. After what happened, Jinwoo Kim tried to stop the girl and yelled for her to stop and move backwards. He started telling her that it was a hell spider, to which the girl was not surprised sarcastically, saying that he had opened her eyes. The hell spider stealthily approached the girl and used its huge paw to pierce through her. Many hell spiders gathered behind Junyang's back, and she gave orders to the explorers to quickly throw in a pile. Junyang turned to Jinwoo Kim and reminded him about the cave spiders. Jinwoo Kim was frozen in place by what he saw, and Junyang called out to the guy, but he didn't react. The guy saw that a huge spider stepped on one of the soldiers, and he remembered a moment from his childhood where the same picture took place. Looked at the spiders and began to say that among them were 2 offspring and 1 queen, and the rest were inferior subspecies they had fought earlier. The guy began to say that you need to use explosives to retreat, cannot worry about the cave collapse of the cave, because the web of these monsters is much stronger than it seems. Junyang started to tell Jinwoo Kim that he had seen hell spiders before. She complimented by saying that he seemed to have a lot of experience in fighting them. Hyonal began to say that there was no end to these monsters, and he started asking where the little ones from the first squad were. Yonho began to ask if he hadn't realized that the guys hanging from the top were a stash of hell spiders, and the others had long since been eaten. He continued and started asking the soldier how much longer to wait for the explosives, and the soldier said, a little longer. One guy started asking Heinel why they should retreat, and the guy said that's what the arachnologist started saying. 686. The guy started saying that after all these monsters were the goal of their expedition, and why retreat as soon as they arrived. Honil started asking the guy if he'd seen the guy who'd just been eaten. The protagonist has given orders for everyone to duck because the spiders are preparing to attack. The guy liked it and boldly jumped towards the cave spider, at which Jinwoo started telling him to stand. He struck the spider's head, and as a result, he broke his arm because the spider's protective layer was too strong. Hunul and Youngho were startled by what they had just witnessed. Yonho started to say that another hell spider was on its way, and he prepared for battle. Suddenly, Jinwoo Kim appeared out of nowhere and used his sword to strike the hell spider. The hell spider was enraged by this, and a battle broke out between Jinwoo and the spider. Yonho was startled by what he saw, and in horror he began to ask what kind of monster it was. Hunul started to ask Yonho what he was looking at there, calling him a goddamn gigolo. Meanwhile, between Jinwoo and the hell spider, they continued their battle. Suddenly, 2 hell spiders snuck up on Jinwoo, and he started asking 2-on-1. Thinking about not having to make a hero of himself, and the fact that he might not be if he was careless, and thought about the fact that he hadn't used a charge in a while. The guy swung his sword and slammed it into the ground, causing an electrical charge. Junyoung Hyunil and Young Ho, along with the rest of the team, watched with their mouths hanging open as Jinwoo did the same. At that moment, a soldier approached the frightened Junyoung, saying that the explosives had been set. Hearing this, she loudly started asking what he was waiting for and told him to blast her faster. While the soldiers were dealing with the explosives, Jinwoo looked at the hell spiders with blue eyes and lightning bolts all over his body. Junyoung starts telling Jinwoo that they've opened a passage and to move toward them. Jinwoo then threw himself at Junyeon and shoved her with such a strong one that she flew far away. Snatching the weapon from Junyeon, and with it, he jumped up to the ceiling and cut through the cobwebs. Hyunil and Young Ho managed to pick up Junyeon so she wouldn't fall, and they all continued to watch together. Junyoung started asking the guy what he was going to do and why he wasn't hiding from the hell spiders. With his punch, Jinwoo made the ceiling collapse, and he told everyone to leave. Turning around and looking after the team, he began to say that they would be seen outside. The chute collapsed, and the passage was blocked by a huge chest of rocks. Meanwhile, Jinwoo remained on the other side of the rubble, and he stood proudly holding Junyeon's weapon in his hands. The guy looked at the hell spiders and started asking them if they were laughing at him. He started asking the hell spiders if they were thinking about defeating him, and he complimented and started saying he felt like he had finally spread his wings. Looking and thinking that they were unlikely to understand what he was saying, so he suggested they have some fun. Guy summoned a portal and had it open a gateway to the labyrinth where his submissives were waiting for him. The Naga warriors began to enter the portal one by one, and meanwhile, the servant girl sat on the throne. The spiders were happy about the addition and began to discuss heatedly about who would take whom to tear apart. At this time, Jinwoo was giving orders to his soldiers, telling the soldiers to protect the gate and the archer and the archers to cover them in the meantime. The queen of the hell spiders started saying that the whole problem is just one guy. A servant girl came over and started to say that it seemed like the spider was going to attack, and Jinwoo replied to her that the second level was too small for him to go on the attack, saying that if the spider queen starts acting rashly, she'll collapse the cave, so all he has to do is sit back and watch them. He went on and started saying that they needed to deal with the smaller individuals first. The servant girl began to tell the master that the spiders were coming, and Jinwoo told her to stay outside the gate. He said that they were no stronger than those horned rats and began to say that they should not be allowed to break in. He gave an order telling them to destroy those cave spiders. The guy started swinging his weapon without fear and thus striking the spiders. The archer from behind took out arrows and began aiming at one of the hell spiders. One of the spiders swooped down on the warrior and he started to grab it by the paw and kicked it back into the wall. The spiders were doing much better than Jinwoo expected. He thought to himself that the archer was a better shot than the cannon. Looked started asking the hell spider if he could try a little harder. He complimented and began to say that he had to defend his name somehow, and that if he fell after such a weak attack, he would have a scratch on his cheek. The servant girl mentally called out to the master, and Jinwoo looked at her saying her name. Dominique used her mind power to warn Jinwoo that the queen of the hell spiders had come to move. The hell spider queen tried to swat the guy with her paw, but he managed to jump back and dodge. The queen was furious at this, and at the fact that he was destroying her subjects, and she began to let out a great roar. The roar was so loud that Jinwoo covered his ears with his hands, and a banner appeared in front of him, saying that the combat power had exceeded the threshold, and the spiders had lost their fear. Looked at his warriors, and was puzzled at what was happening to the Nagami. The hell spiders attacked the Nagi, and they were unable to fight back, and little by little began to give up their position. The Nagi wars, despite all the wounds, despite all the injuries, continued. During the battle, Jinwoo shouted and started asking Dominique to answer him. Dominique, with the power of thought, began to tell Jinwoo that the gate was in danger, and there were too many inferior spiders here. After thinking for a moment, he started to tell them to wait a bit, and at that moment, he was attacked by a hell spider that tried to hit him with its paw. The guy managed to bounce and dodge the hell spider, and after that he was very angry because the spider tore his clothes. Reflecting on the fact that the queen of the hell spiders had been distracted from the gate, and now she was focused on him. He continued and began to say that it would be too dangerous to ignore her and let her close to the gate. The brutal fight between the hell spider queen and Jin was still going on. The guy attacked one of the beggar cave spiders and took his head off, and he got a big deep gem from his neck, and then he realized why they got stronger. He started saying that it was obvious, since the packs are constantly putting deep gems inside of them. The deep gem he pulled out of the spider, he threw into the portal, and it landed at the magic stone. The banner popped up, saying that one good quality medium-level depth gem had been donated. At the same moment, Jinwoo Kim loudly said that he was summoning Nagu the magician. The silhouette of a majestic, large monster came out of the portal, and Jinwoo told him to finish off the spider. The mage raised his staff and began to use his magic against the hell spiders. The hell spiders, one by one, began filing the crystals the mage had captured them in. Looked and saw what the mage had managed to destroy, all the little things of the opponents. Real hell spiders aren't hurt, must be they prioritize scale over strength. Dominique began to tell Jinwoo that the wars had taken the life of one of the hell spiders. He pondered on how to deal with the queen of the hell spiders. The guy remembered that the hell spider queen's weaknesses are the eyes, the jaws, and the joints on her paws, but she's too big. He thought for sure he'd get to the brain if he hit her eyes at random. He also thought about trying to get through the jaws. Dominicana started to tell the master that the cave was badly damaged and that one wrong step was taken, but she was interrupted by Jinwoo Kim. He began to tell them to be ready because they would attack the ceiling and thus break through to the first floor. After saying that it was too dangerous and that they didn't have the strength to send this monster to the other world, Jinwoo fell silent. The guy jumped up to face the queen of the hell spiders and started saying that this was their only chance. Jinwoo jumped onto a rock ledge and looked to see if the queen of the hell spiders was following him. The guy started saying that he needed to pay her back for his spoiled childhood, and it would be a great honor for her because she would be the first. The maid and the Naga warriors were watching this, and the maid started saying that she hoped Jinwoo had a plan, and the magician started asking if he was going to bury her alive. Dominicana starts saying, that it's not, and apparently that he wants to dig a passageway, since he can't bury the spider, or he's hoping to find something on the first floor. Dominicana reflected on the fact that the master was fighting hard, and she could do absolutely nothing to help him. She continued, and thought about the fact that even the Nagi, who should be fighting alongside him, were just watching. Frowning, she couldn't understand his intentions, even though she was the closest. Suddenly, the moment when Jinwoo talked about them not having enough strength popped up in her mind. Dominicana began to tell the servants not to feel depressed. She began to say, but that they were standing aside, not because they were useless. She started to say that the master always rushed into battle to protect his minions, and he thinks of their safety even in such a situation. The acolyte continued and began to say that he is not willing to sacrifice them. He fights alone because he alone is able to deal with them. Dominicana praised him and couldn't believe that there was someone so honorable. She exclaimed that they were not observers, for they were commanded to be on the alert. If they believed in their master, it would be their turn. The acolyte began to ask the mage how much mana he had left. At this time, the fight between the wild spider queen and Jinwoo continued, and he used his jumps to climb onto a high ledge. He started saying he couldn't have gotten there if he hadn't used the walls. Meanwhile, Heinel started saying that it seemed like the underground tremors were getting closer and closer, to which he was told that there shouldn't be any attacking monsters on the first level. One of the team suggested they get out of there because he had a bad feeling about it. 7-86. At this time, someone in the group emphasized that the ground began to crack, and after a moment, a huge paw of a hell spider kicked out. Banners appeared next to Jinwoo saying that a new passageway had been opened between the first and second floor, and he started to say that he didn't care about that right now. The guy thought that he was lucky, because it was rare to have such a cave on the first floor, and wondered if he could break through the surface. Now, Jinwoo had the question of how to throw this infernal spider down now. Meanwhile, the mage decided to come to the aid of his master, and the latter used his powers. From what he had seen and heard, he was misunderstood from the fact that the mage had inflicted a weak magical attack by the Ludom. The servant began to say what must be a spider confused by such a weak attack. However, the path that leads upstairs was covered in a thick layer of ice. She went on to say that the ice could not support such a heavy creature and would collapse with it. No matter what, he couldn't believe that the maid had figured out his plan. The mage began to hiss, and the acolyte began to speak, and that she understood that, of course, the fall would not send the fart to the other world. The servant began to say that the master does not need any more tricks and traps, but instead he needs more pure attacks. She continued and began to say that it was necessary to create an opportunity where their master could at least once strike with all his might. Dominicana started to say, and that they wouldn't let the spider get away, and they would attack it with all the power they had. Striking the final blow against the queen of the hell spiders, she was destroyed. After the battle, banners appeared saying that Jinwoo had achieved the title of normal commander and that they had destroyed the plowing duke's team. He didn't think about the fact that along with the Naga warriors' rank increases, their size would increase as well. But despite all these transformations, the arm of one of the warriors never recovered. Asking the maid why the mage had not transformed since he had performed well in battle, he waited for her answer. She replied that mages need more experience points to do this, and they also need a laboratory that can only be created after reaching level 4. Seeing that the portal had very little power, and after that, he went to check the loot, and the slaves brought him all the gems he had gotten. He calculated that he had only gotten 6 good quality gems for the hell spiders and 44 gems for the inferior subspecies, sacrificing 2 good quality mid-rank gems, and after that, the labyrinth upgrade began. The guy started saying that he would take a couple of low-ranked gems because if he came back empty-handed, he might be suspected. He started to say the fight was over, but that didn't mean they could relax. The guy started saying that they had defeated a fierce enemy, so the nearness of the labyrinth would become even stronger because you can't give others this portal, ordering them to take as many bodies as needed, and once he was gone, then have them block all passages to the portal with magic. He moved towards the portal. He began to ask his subjects if they could handle his order, and the mage hissed shakily. He then asked Dominicana what was wrong with him, and she replied that the mage's mana was running low. To the rest of Jinwoo's warriors, Kim ordered them to hide the portal behind boulders. The servant began to ask him if he was leaving, and he replied that he was, because the passage to the first level was clear, and he would be back in time to renew the labyrinth. Meanwhile, behind his back stood an embarrassed servant girl, and she clearly had something to say to her master. Telling the maid that it was a great job, even though they had come up with the worst plan in history, her initiative had played into their hands. The guy started telling the warriors who were fighting to think about what reward they wanted, and they would get it as soon as he got back. Afterward, he thanked everyone for their work and started saying he'd be back in 5 days. 5 days later, Junyeon Young-ho and Hyun-il walked into the expedition tent. Jinwoo was sitting in the tent eating something when he saw the guys and started telling them that they had been walking for a long time. He started saying that it took him 5 days to do what they should have taken 2 weeks to do, and Junyoung got really angry and started saying that that wasn't the problem. Asked if they were hungry and handed them a bowl of soup and wanted to say something about the guy but was interrupted. The girl started to ask what happened, and Jinwoo Kim started to say that he had a lucky break and ran away. She started to ask, what wasn't he the one who said it was pointless to run away? And Jinwoo started to say that he didn't know who it was, but he was really lucky. Junyoung starts asking if he's always been like this, to which he says he doesn't know. She began to say that somehow he had saved her life, and now he could ask her for anything he wanted, and she would try to fulfill his every wish. He starts to say that they grew up in a geyser, so don't let him talk nonsense. But in response, Junyoung starts to say that she still owes him. Started telling her, or so she insists. Then he has something on his mind, and the girl started asking, and what is it? He handed her a plate and started to ask Junyoung to wash it. The guy started to grab his outerwear and trailed off, saying that now they were even, and he could go home. She started to say that she would call him to tell her about the lower floors, but he replied that he didn't know what she was talking about. The lad came to the shopkeeper and gave him his booty, and the latter was very pleased with the precious deep gems he had brought him. The shopkeeper started to say that he would pay him 400 million won for the broken equipment, and the guy was very surprised at the price. The old man began to ask him if perhaps it was too little for him, and he replied that it wasn't that. The guy started asking the shopkeeper if he could find him a house in a secluded place for 300 million won, and the old man started asking who he thought he was. The shopkeeper started to say that it looked like we'd have to find another middleman, and the shopkeeper started to say not that he couldn't do it, and Jinwoo interrupted him. And after thinking for a while, I added that since the old man had agreed, he should tell everyone that Jinwoo was working here. A little later, the shopkeeper was on the phone and was very angry. On the other side of the phone, he was told that they were a regular jewelry store and they didn't need to go downstairs because they only worked with materials. The guy started saying it was the only way he could get down into the geyser and thanked the old man for his help. The shopkeeper was angry and didn't know what he should do with this guy. While the maid was minding her own business, a portal appeared behind her back. Jinwoo came out of that portal, and the maid was glad to see him return. The guy thought about the fact that he can't keep closing and opening the portal there. He should already live separately. He remembered that when he got home, he had been reprimanded by his father for disappearing from home for 20 days and not calling once. Thought that with the move, he could get rid of the old man's nagging. Dominicana began to ask if everything was all right with the mother, and the latter replied that everything was fine. He was just tired from the piling up of cases. He started to ask if the labyrinth renovation was completed, and the maid started to say that it had just finished. Jinwoo started to say that nothing had changed in appearance. Taking a closer look and making sure nothing had changed, but the maid explained that the structures are not automatically installed, they are all added to the list. She began to say that the external changes will be at the 5th level. Jinwoo began to say, since they have gems, they will develop. Dominicana started to say, and that there was a guest in the maze, and the tired guy started to ask, what kind of guest? The acolyte began to say that this guest was waiting for him at the entrance to the labyrinth. She began to say that there is a team that visits every labyrinth, and it seems they are quite powerful if they can visit every corner of the geyser. Jinwoo approached the entrance of the maze, and the stranger began to say that this was the new owner of the maze. The stranger bowed and began to say that the dark merchant welcomed him. Rubbing his hands together, the dark merchant began to say that he couldn't wait to work with them. Jinwoo looked at the dark merchant with indifference and began to speak clearly. He started asking Mr. Beck how he found the place, and he told him that he already knew about it. The merchant began to say that the news of the new owner of the labyrinth that led the brave Nagas into battle against the infernal spiders had already spread. With the power of thought, Dominicana began to tell his master that the dark merchant was lying. The dark merchants periodically watch what happens in the geyser, and apparently this area is under merchant surveillance. She started talking, and if the one pretends to be picky or a weird person, the one still can't underestimate you. The dark merchant began to say that he was doing well in the maze, and Jinwoo began to say what was true was true. Jinwoo started to ask the dark merchant so what business he had with him. The merchant began to say that they would like to build a supportive and friendly relationship with the new owner of the maze. He laid out his merchandise and started saying that in other words, he wanted to say he was here to make a sale. Jinwoo started saying that he had heard that dark market vendors can be dangerous and can they just kick out, and Dominicana started saying and that no way. The maid started saying that if they don't get along, he'll start another rumor about him in the geyser. Jinwoo started to say that since they had already noticed them, they would have to use acting. Dominicana started to say that a merchant can benefit if you buy something worthwhile from him, since they have a lot of valuable goods, and Jinwoo started to say that he would buy something from him. Jinwoo started to say he could bring a couple of depth gems, and Dominicana interrupted him. She advised him to buy the first thing the merchant advised him to buy. The dark merchant began to say that he seemed to have had a word with his servant, and Jinwoo began to say that that was it, and to show him what he had. The salesman started asking if he was looking for something specific, and the guy started saying he would buy whatever he recommended. The dark merchant started saying that it's a big one, and he just happens to have one rare item. The merchant handed him a bottle of purple liquid and began to say that there were only a couple of these left in the geyser, and they were called parasites. He voiced the price and began to say that that one cost. One deep, gem-high-ranking merchant began to say that it would be rude to assume that he could not afford such a thing. Jinwoo initially asked for a closer look at this bottle, and the merchant, of course, gave it to him. Holding the bottle in his hands, Jinwoo began to scrutinize it carefully before buying it. The guy looked at the bottle and then at the maid, and she nodded her head in the affirmative. Jinwoo held out a large, good-quality, profound gem to the merchant. The merchant began to say that he would give this bottle for 5 of the same deep gems. After a while, Jinwoo was already sitting on his throne and holding the very same cherished bottle. After buying it, Jinwoo started asking the servant that it is their tradition to first offer the most expensive artifact they have, and the servant started saying, "Why so-and-so?" Dominicana began to say, that the artifact would do no good until he accepted it. Jinwoo started to say he wasn't going to keep it as some trinket and opened it. He poured the contents onto his hand and began to say that the maid's advice had never once failed him. Looking at his hand with suspicion, he saw that the parasite had invaded his skin. Jinwoo started to say that he felt like he was looking less and less like a human every day, and he couldn't say that he used to look much like one. The boy let go of that situation of trading with the dark merchant and thought about the fact that it was time to start the maze improvements he had been putting off for so long. He turned to Dominicana and started saying he needed her help. After improving, Jinwoo started to say that he was a bit hasty in getting it done. The servant girl began to say that it was customary in labyrinths to first build internal structures and improve military power before ranking up. Dominicana started saying, that he owns 90% of their combat power, so he thinks he can afford a quick rank increase. Jinwoo started to ask if the other maze owners were wimps, and she replied that they probably didn't want to stick their necks out. In front of the guy popped up a list of available structures for building, and now he can grow fruit vegetables for the nags that work for the benefit of the maze. Also available to build a forge laboratory and temple, both of these structures improve physical magic and healing abilities, and Jinwoo began to say, "Open the map." In addition, you can build a bar where you can collect information from neutral creatures that will visit the labyrinth. The guy started saying that the kitchen lab and the temple require too much energy, so he decided to improve the defense first. Jinwoo started to tell the slave to drag all the low-rank gems that he has, and he is willing to sacrifice all of them. He donated 30 low-rank profound gems and started saying that he was summoning an army. After a week, Dominique approached Jinwoo and began to say that the expansion of the nest was complete and that the Nagi had managed to find giant hares and black bears. She began to say that the idle slaves had gone in search of gems, as well as setting traps, and Jinwoo began to ask if she was letting them rest. She replied that they had plenty of time to rest and that the new fighters were on defense patrol and training. Jinwoo was glad that their maze was finally getting a proper look, but he felt like they were too busy. The guy noticed that they were getting low on gems from the flowers, and he started telling the maid that they would need to go after the deep gems again. The servant began to ask if everything was well with the master, because he had begun to stay longer in the labyrinth. She began to say that she did not mind, but what about his family? He started to say that everything was fine, and he was now living alone in a mountain range. Jinwoo continued and began to say that there were no stores or houses nearby if the opportunity arose. He began to say that he would give the maid a tour. Dominica was very happy about it and started saying, "Why, yes, please." The guy saw the portal begin to close and he didn't think he'd be here that long. Jinwoo started to say that he would go to bed and also started to tell the maid to go rest. After returning home, Jinwoo was hungry and thought about bringing something like ramen to the maze. A banner popped up in front of the guy informing him that the parasite was embedded in the owner's body, and Jinwoo was surprised by the news. The parasite began to take over the guy's body, and he felt a terrible pain in the area of his eye. Junyoung, meanwhile, walked up to his house and started asking herself if he really lived here. The girl saw that there was a lot of noise coming from his house, and she burst into his house, asking if everything was all right. Walking over the threshold, she saw Jinwoo kneeling and screaming in pain. Jinwoo starts apologizing for catching him like that, and Junyoung starts asking what it was. The girl started to say that it was like he had half of his face burned off, and the guy started to say that it was nothing like that. Jinwoo began to say that it is something like barley only from the labyrinth, and the girl began to say, and so that he did not lie to her, she began to say that all his life in the geyser, and did not see such a thing. She continued, and started to say that the dungeon children are from deep levels that she knows, but Jinwoo interrupted her, and started to ask if they are from level 12. The girl anxiously began to ask what, and he replied that he had contracted it on the 12th level in the labyrinth from the odoriferous Duke. Junyoung started to say that all the children of the 12th level were either missing or in the other world. When Jinwoo heard that, she started to ask why people think he's in the other world when he's here. The girl realized why Jinwoo knows so much about the hell spiders, and now the girl knows where the guy was born, and if she blabbed to anyone, she wouldn't be believed. The guy started asking the girl why she came here uninvited and how she knew where he lived, to which she told him that she wanted to ask him if he would join the next expedition. Junyoung started to say, that he wouldn't let her in, just to pay him back, so she was thinking of inviting him to her team. She went on to say that he would hardly be interested in her proposal, since he was stronger than all of them put together. Then he began to say that she should not exaggerate his strength, for he had been living on the surface for a long time, but recently he had been coming back. Jinwoo started saying that Geyser is strong and he agrees to go with them. It will hide his level from the others. The girl was glad, because the 12th level dungeon child would be on the same team with her. He repeated, saying that it was as long as she would keep it a secret. Junyoung started to say that she should go back and adjust the expedition plan because she was sure that he would say no, and the guy started to say that they would see each other again. The girl began to say that the next expedition would be in 4 days, and they were going to descend to the 6th level for 2 weeks. She went on to say that there would be 5 dungeon children and 10 normal explorers in the team, and 2 he had already seen on the last outing. Hearing this, Jinwoo didn't realize that a team that failed in the 2nd level was going straight to the 6th level. She began to say that their team could go down to the 8th level if they did not make mistakes, and Jinwoo began to say that the enemies were not weak. The girl started to say that they will prepare all the equipment themselves, and that she expects it in 4 days, and she will send all the details by mail. Junyoung started to say, that she had a lot to prepare, and she went. The guy started saying if she wanted to come again, she should call first, or he would go to the police. The girl, from embarrassment, ran away from all legs, and began to say that he will definitely call. The guy started telling himself that he had just moved, and it was a good thing he had at least closed the portal. 4 days later, Jinwoo was at the gates of Panju, and he had the impression that he was entering the subway. The girl began to say that these gates are used for large-scale expeditions, and to enter you need to show a special ID. She began to say that on the 2nd level, there is a new passage, and it is now dangerous to be there because of the crowd of monsters. Jinwoo looked at the new team members with complete indifference. The new team member walked up to Jinwoo, started asking him what it must be that saved their Junyoung. He introduced himself with the name Jongchang-sik, and she's from level 7, and the guy started saying that he just got lucky, and introduced himself that way. Hyunil started to say that Young-ho was the first one to bolt at the sight of it all, and Young-ho replied that it was the opposite. The guys calmed down and started talking, and that they were happy to be on the same team again, and they would do their best. Junyoung came over to the guys and told them to stop talking and get to work, and she started telling Young-ho that he was in charge of the researchers. The girl started to tell Chang-shik that she hoped he would do a good job, and he replied that he would do a good job. Jinwoo started to ask, that isn't she the captain? And the girl started to say, but that he would understand everything. Meanwhile, in the bar of the Naga maze, the maid lay on the bar riser and was bored. The servant first asked the bartender's slave to add another drink to her mug. One of the slaves started saying that Dominicana looked like a grown, depressed woman looking for a man. Another slave started saying that she was always like that when the master wasn't around. The slave began to say that at least now they have a bar, because before him, she was a real hysteric. One of the slaves recalled how a servant girl tried to eat his tail, saying it would grow back. The slaves continued their discussions, and one began to say that there were rumors that she had a secret room where she kept her master's used underwear and socks. All the while, the servant girl stood behind them and started asking them what secret room they were talking about. Her anger changed to joy, and she started to say what a great idea that was. This expedition was quite different from the previous expedition where there were mercenary explorers and dungeon children. Since everyone here is from the same team, and therefore the dungeon cubs and explorers behave very coherently. Junyoung and Jinwoo, and especially Chang-shik, to keep them behind them at all times. After that, Jinwoo realized why he took the role of captain, despite them being lower level, and the girl agreed, saying that he was a capable man. They continued walking through the labyrinth and talking animatedly about something. The detect skill allows you to see all living creatures, except those with a special ability to hide. Junyoung started to say, what she thought he had that ability too, but he started to say that he just felt it all. The girl believed that the sixth sense of 12th level dungeon children was on a completely different level. The researchers started whispering, because one of them had heard something about the 12th level. Jinwoo got angry and started to say that he told her not to talk too much. The researcher began to say that they were told to gather all the children of the dungeon in the center. The entire team stood in front of a huge and unknown door, and everyone caught a glimpse of the unknown. Chunsik began to say that this was the entrance to an abandoned labyrinth. Wolf monkeys had perchance taken the path they usually traveled. He started saying that he couldn't detect anything with his skill, so he didn't think they were taking much of a risk. Someone started saying it seemed huge, and they started asking if it was going to be okay. He started saying he had memorized the whole way. Jinwoo listened and began to say that he had no objections then, and perhaps he would gain ideas for his labyrinth. Chansik started to say that it's settled then, and they'll go to the center of the maze, so they need to be careful. The monster began to ask what Draken's condition was, and the servant replied that he was badly injured and would need a few days to recover. Anactus began to ask if they could enter the marked area, and Rikshasha began to say that it was possible, but that the distance for the Matera and the ancient dragons was sufficient. He began to say that there was no need to worry about it because everyone in Geyser knows that they ancient dragons are quite shrewd, and Rikshasha agreed. Anactus started to ask Rikshasha how long the rounds would take, and she said about 3 months, and he started to ask how long it would take or if she would do it alone. She voiced a figure of 2 weeks. Upon hearing this, Anactus began to say that since Draken had become a useless burden, she would do the work alone. Looking up from the headrest, the Elphus knew that she was in fact the traitor. The team walked through this door, and beyond it, they met the owner's room. Jinwoo began to ask how this could be, since it had been hours since they had entered the labyrinth, and they still hadn't come across anything. Jang-suk began to say that this labyrinth had been abandoned since the end of the war, and that's why there was nothing marked on the map. He supplemented by saying that the military was going to set up a base in the center of the 3rd level, and Jinwoo started asking if he had a map. The one replied that there is a map, and it is sold in the mall of the maze. He complimented and started saying that they only have the top-tier maps, and the military also has the middle-tier maps as well. Changsan started saying that they'd set up a pass here, and for Hinjun and Youngho to take researchers to install motion sensors at the entrance to the rest of the camp organization. He began to say the faster they got through, the more time they would have to rest. Jinwoo started to say that he didn't assign him anything, and Junyoung started to say what she said last time, that you should conserve your energy. Then she pointed her finger and started saying that if he was so bored, he could look around the owner's room. Continuing, she began to say, and that there is a throne of a monster that used to rule the entire labyrinth, just to think they have kings. Jinwoo twisted in pain as his head ached again due to the parasite. Junyoung starts asking if he's okay and if he's having headaches again, and he says he is, but not as bad as last time. The guy started asking if she could keep anyone out, and she said sure. He thought how nice it was that she couldn't see the pop-ups. Jinwoo noticed that there was no pain this time, and the parasite hadn't shown itself since that incident. The guy did not understand what was happening to his vision, because in front of him, he saw something red flickering in front of him. He noticed there was something under the altar, and he didn't have this superpower before. Jinwoo walked over to the ruins of the altar and began to push the stones apart to see what was there. The guy's eye glowed red after he started to pick up the object he was so attracted to. Jinwoo looked and realized that this stone was not like a profound gem. A banner appeared in front of the guy saying that he had discovered a fragment of the maze. He concluded that it was what the eye had caught on, and it was better than the gem. After pondering, Jinwoo Kim looked away, and he couldn't believe his eyes. The guy saw a lot of shiny objects, and I can't believe it's all deep gems. Meanwhile, the maid continued to drink at the bar, and the slave approached his companions to see if they were on watch today. Greenie started telling his comrades that something was wrong with their boss, and they wanted to tell him everything, but they couldn't. The slave started to say that they wanted to say that she felt guilty for secretly making room with his used socks and underpants from the master. He started reasoning, saying why she just didn't at first ask, make them such a room they could make a room for the master and for her too. She's more like a human, and of course, her status is much higher than theirs. Greenie started saying that's why it's probably uncomfortable living in the same nest with them, and he started asking what they were staring at. This whole conversation was overheard by a servant girl and came up behind him from behind and called him fresh meat. At this time, the expedition team continued on their way and were discussing something heatedly. Jun Young starts asking the guy if he has any weird hobbies or something, and Jinwoo replies that he doesn't have any. The guy started to say that he didn't get enough sleep, and because of that he was tired. He added that he was in a bad mood. Jinwoo thought about how lucky he was to have collected dozens of profound gems and hidden them in the maze. He also ran through the opened parts of the map. He continued and began to say that next time he would have to come here alone, and that it was all thanks to the parasite whom he had not thanked. The soldier shouted that the commander was asking all the children of the dungeon to gather together. Jinwoo noticed that all he was being ordered to do was stand behind or huddle together, and he assumed that maybe there was a monster nearby. Chang-sik started to say that right outside that entrance is a crowd of monsters pointing his thumb at it. He began to say that given the sounds they make, they are either black-footed monkeys or fanged bats, at worst wolf monkeys. Jinwoo started to ask that his ability can't foresee their species for sure. The one replied that he can locate numerical strength and affiliation. Jiang Shik started to say that there was no way they could get around them and that they weren't going to leave, and then Hyunil started to say that they could wait until they had killed each other. He replied that it was even more dangerous because there were too many of them and other predators might come there at the noise and the smell of blood. He assumed that they had no other choice but to pummel them and wanted to avoid battles until the 6th level, but apparently not without them. Chang-sik began to say that it wasn't that simple because 28 medium-sized monsters were now at the 3rd level and fighting over territory. Junyeon laughed and started to say, that 3rd level monsters are just gnats to Jinwoo. Jinwoo started to say that it just won't end, and why don't they just destroy them? Jungsak started to say that would be great. The guy offered to do it together, saying he'd take half. Chansik looked to see what was going on, and if they were starting to be each other, and noticed that there were about 30 critters, and he felt like it was his last day. Jinwoo heard all this and said, "No way," attacked a pack of evil monsters. Changshik couldn't believe his eyes, because it's impossible to deal with monsters in one blow, he thought. Usually dungeon children deal with monsters in just a couple minutes. The fighting style of each of the children of the labyrinth corresponds to where they grew up, as well as their level and environment. Attacking without thinking until the enemy falls off his feet is how most children of the labyrinth fight. Attacking without thinking until the enemy falls off his feet is how most children of the labyrinth fight. His level of speed and strength seems to be much higher than Junyon's, and it was a mystery to him how he managed to move like that. The girl started talking a Jinwoo from Marcus's maze, and the latter started to interject if they were talking about the deepest part of the 7th maze. Hearing this, Chan Shik was surprised to hear her ask if she was talking about the deepest part of the 7th level, namely the Scarlet Lion Marcus maze, and she confirmed it. The girl started to say that he had to wade through many mazes and monsters to get to the 6th level, probably during that he realized how to fight. Since it was even lower than the entrance to the 8th level, then Changshik began to say that everything was working out since he had grown up in such a place. Changshik started saying that he must have an innate fighting talent, and he can't find an explanation for all this anymore. The girl thought about thinking better of Jinwoo's story. She started to say that enough talking, and we should get to work, and Chansik agreed with her. Chansik looked fearfully at the approaching monster, and began to say that they needed to show what they could do. Meanwhile, Jinwoo Kim noticed that his body had become much lighter, and his enemy's movements seemed slow. Jinwoo started to say that he was trying to keep his strength level on par with Jun Young, but why did it seem like that was all he could do? The guy saw on the banners that the parasite had activated latent powers to a low degree, and depending on the wielder's powers, the level could increase. After this news, the guy could see through the flesh to where the monster's heart is, which protects the ribs. The more he learns about the abilities, the more useful he becomes, and now that price seems like a penny to him. Except when he tried to take possession of his body, he thought it would be necessary to experiment, and that would reveal all the possibilities. The team started telling Jinwoo that they were done there, and in response, the guy started telling them that he was too. Jun Young said that he said he'd take half of it, but ended up destroying 70%, and Jinwoo started asking if it was too much. The girl replied that on the contrary, their expedition was going much better, and she began to say that it was going better and to make up nonsense to justify it. According to her researchers, say that he is a born war hero and that he will soon be worshipped, and Jinwoo realized he was overreacting. The girl began to tell the soldiers that the battle is over and that they should not hang around and collect the deep gems before the monsters come to the smell of blood. Chang-shik called out to Jun Young and she started telling him that it's a great job. He starts telling the girl that they seem to have a problem, and Jun Young starts asking him out of misunderstanding. Chang-sik began to say that another expeditionary force was approaching them and was twice their size, and that they were going to split up to find them. He started to say that he couldn't detect them earlier because of the battle, but they were probably watching them while they fought. Jun Young began to speak, and the dungeon children and explorers to prepare for battle because a battle was coming. Jinwoo started to ask why they were afraid of them because they were not monsters, and the girl said that in the geyser, not only monsters become your enemies. The girl continued and began to say, that since the geyser is not subject to their laws, it is easy to steal another's prey here. They felled 30 medium-sized monsters, and the team exhausted. After the battle, the alien squad was watching them and intended to attack them after the battle. If it wasn't for Jang-sik's ability, the whole team would have been trapped. Chan-sik began to say that they were beginning to group together and that they seemed to realize that they were aware of their presence. He starts to say that it looks like they've changed their minds about surrounding them. Jinwoo starts to ask if they're leaving, and Jang-sik starts to say that they're not, and they're getting closer. Jun Young started to say, that they should be alert and act on the occasion the team was tired, and they would have been caught anyway, even if they wanted to run away. The girl turned to Jinwoo and began to say that they already rely on him heavily as it is. She started asking if she could trust him if things went wrong, and the guy said sure. Jinwoo, answering the girl smilingly, began to say that he liked this squad. Our team had a visit from another hostile team. The girl insulted him, and he began to ask why insult him at once, because they had not seen each other for a long time, and that he was glad to meet them. Sung Chung-hul started to say that he had heard that they had recently had a fight with the Hell Spiders, and that they weren't shaken up too badly. Jun Young started talking, and to get him to shut up, and leave, to which he replied to get them to the lower levels, then they need to pass through here. Sung Chung-hul started asking the team if they had anything interesting. The girl was very angry about those words, and Jinwoo started asking Chang-sik what it was. Chang-sik began to say that there was an organization called the Explorers Association, and that they had recently received government support, but in reality, they were just a gang of thugs. Jinwoo started to ask if the state was okay with it, and he replied that it was hard to believe, but their association has a constant influx of people. So now most teams are now part of the association, rather than operating independently, all because there is a lot of money invested in Geyser. Chang-sik continued by saying that probably together people think they are doing a great thing, but in the end, it all comes down to a battle for money. The parasite living inside Jinwoo analyzed the strength of the enemies and found out that there were 9 dungeon children among them, and the rest were all below the 7th level. Jinwoo realized that if they got into a fight with them, they would definitely kill everyone but him. These guys from their enemy team were getting on Jinwoo Kim's nerves. The bloodlust feels the same as from the king of the labyrinth, from that you can't move due to fear. Sung Chung-hul started asking if they were scared because he was just kidding, and he turned to Jun Young and said that she had become cowardly since the last time they met. The girl was furious at these words, and she began to say that it was not so. Sung Chung-hul started asking if she wanted to make him look bad, and he complimented and started saying that he at least had fun. He started to say that they had been hit hard by these monsters, and he just wanted to ask if they would need his help. With a grin, he smiled and started to say that Appa had a lot to do. Sung Chung-hul ordered his team to leave, saying that they wouldn't touch their little baby girl Jun Young's loot. He turned to Jinwoo and started to say that he didn't think they had ever met, but he wanted to give him one piece of advice. Although Jun Young is cute, but her pathetic team couldn't even join the association, so don't bother with them. He went on and started saying that he seemed like a pretty skillful guy and to let him know if he wanted to join a normal team. As he was leaving, he began to tell the association to say his name because they know him, but he replied that he wasn't interested, and Sung Chung-hul began to say that he would be waiting for him. Sung Chung-hul said that they'll see Jun Young again. The girl was angry at his words, and Chang-sik started telling her to calm down, and they were lucky they didn't get into a fight. Chang-sik advised Jinwoo to temper his ardor as well, but the guy was calm. Jun Young and Chang-sik started talking to him too, so he wouldn't pretend to be calm, and Jinwoo didn't understand anything. Chang-sik began to say that he had never felt such a strong bloodlust, and Jinwoo replied that he felt like the king of the labyrinth was behind him. Hyunil started to ask about the bloodlust because they didn't feel anything, and Jang Shik started to say that their senses had to reach a certain level to feel that way. Jinwoo started telling Jun Young that they seemed to know that guy pretty well, and the girl laughingly replied that they were from the same labyrinth. She started to say that now he's not the same as he used to be, and that he was always a little aggressive, but was doing a great job as a leader. The girl knows that after the escape, everyone tasted freedom and money, but she had no idea that people could change so much. Jun Young starts to say that she thinks it's worth going back after they've collected the loot. Jang Shik supports her in this. Jinwoo asked if they should reach the 6th level and was told that Song S-Jong-hol's team would definitely get in their way again. The girl continued and started talking, and that she had no idea what he would do if she collided again because they have a huge squad that will attract all the monsters nearby. She began to say that if there were other circumstances, she would have insisted that they continue on their way, but they had already gotten a lot of goodies. The soldiers started to tell the girl that they were done dealing with the loot, and Jun Young started to say that the team was coming back. Their journey back went smoothly, and they made it back in 1 week. Every time they went down into the geyser, they were bound to get into trouble, and it was amazing that they all came back in one piece. Jun Young started to say, and that they probably just made it back in time. Jinwoo Kim realized that he needed to find out more about the Researchers Association about Sung Chong-hul. The guy came to the shopkeeper and started asking him what he knew about Sung Chong-hul, and he started telling him that he was the most unpleasant guy in the organization. The shopkeeper began to say that because they had set a minimum level for descent, the survival rate of normal explorers had skyrocketed. In the past, dungeon children had no restrictions. They could take any number of explorers with them, due to which their mortality rate increased. He began to say that he could look at this as a set of rules, or as restrictions, but the community is fine with the current controls from the association. After Jinwoo started to say that Song Chong-hul had caused some trouble or something, and the old man started to say that he had no idea, and even if he did it as secretly as possible. The guy started to ask if that was all the old man knew or not, and in response, he heard that it was not easy to get information from the geyser, and all that could be obtained were just rumors. After a bit of thinking, the shopkeeper began to say that he remembered something, and that there are factions of human hunters. High-level dungeon kids without any explorers band together and attack other people's units to take the loot for themselves. These people form gangs and sharpen their teeth into fangs. Among them are the guys from the Abyss, so keep your eyes open. The guy started saying that this was pretty useful information, and he would be more careful. The old man started saying that he shouldn't worry about him. The shopkeeper started asking the guy about no gems today, and the guy started saying he was paid in money, so there was nothing. After thinking for a while, he began to say that even though the society supports the association, he wondered what caused Jun Young to hate the association so much. Walking down the street, he thought about how he didn't see any problem. Meanwhile, the maid was walking around the maze, and a portal appeared from which Jinwoo emerged, and Dominique was very happy about it. Dominicana began to say that he had returned earlier than planned, and Jinwoo began to say that the expedition had ended faster than planned. The guy started to ask the maid how things were in the maze, and Dominique fell silent. Suddenly, he got worried, and he called Dominique again, and she started to say that they had a guest, and he was waiting in the pub. The guy started asking if it was that dark merchant again, and the girl started saying not this time, and that it was a hired low elf. Not understanding anything, the guy started saying he needed to meet him. Dominicana began to say, and that the lower elves are devoid of all loyalty and sense of dignity. This is in case he was thinking of hiring someone. They are so untrustworthy. Then we should boldly chase him out of here, and why he is still in the labyrinth, and the maid thought about it. She began to say that unfortunately, at the moment, there are not enough scouts in the labyrinth, even though they have archers with a wide angle of view. So she thought they might need an inferior elf, and Jinwoo started saying that they really lacked agility and needed to explore the map. He replied that then he would make his own decision, and Dominica started to ask him for forgiveness, and he began to tell her not to worry because leaders need to make decisions. The cloaked stranger got up from the table and walked over to Jinwoo, and the guy was very surprised. There was a girl standing in front of him, and he started talking. As it turned out, you were the elf I had heard about. The acolyte was furious at this, and she began to speak up and to get the elf to show respect to the master. The Rikshasha bowed down and began to speak, and O inimitable lord of the throne that is able to see through the curtain of darkness, this worthless wanderer has settled in his domain. She first asked him to grant her the great honor of introducing herself to the great labyrinth master, and Jinwoo began to tell her to speak. The girl started to say that her name is Rikshasha, and she is a mercenary low elf, and Jinwoo started to say that she is quite confident in her modesty. As he watched, he began to ask Rikshasha how she had the guts to approach him with a weapon. Rikshasha briefly showed her weapon and bowed her head again, and Dominicana started to ask how dare some elf, and Jinwoo interrupted her, telling her to stop. The elf began to say to the guy that such a worthless and useless creature doubted the abilities of such a powerful creature for nothing, and the guy began to say that he should put aside flattery. Rikshasha stood up and began to speak, and that she had never seen a human occupy the throne of the labyrinth before, and she wanted to make sure that one was competent enough. Looking at her, he started to ask if he passed the test, and Rikshasha started to say, yes, and she made sure it was pointless to try to hurt him. The guy started asking if she was really a mercenary and what she specialized in, and Rikshasha started saying that she was an intelligence escort and information gatherer. Dominicana started to say that Rikshasha was hired, and Jinwoo started to tell her to calm down because she said that they need a scout. After assessing the situation and thinking for a bit, he suggested they continue their conversation while he showed them the labyrinth. The guy started giving Rikshasha a tour of the maze, and she watched the whole thing without any interest. Rikshasha noticed that the core of the labyrinth was not fenced off and could be seen even from the corridor. She also noticed that there were no traps at the entrance to the labyrinth, not even the simplest of traps, and the slaves had no hint of seriousness at all. Rikshasha had a question about what this man was trying to accomplish and whether or not he was fully aware that he was a labyrinth master. She noticed that the slaves started fighting instead of working, and she began to say that the slaves were shirking their work. In response, she heard that the slaves had the day off today and had nothing to do, and the girl was very surprised by that. Rikshasha began to ask where it is seen that a slave in the labyrinth has a day off, and Jinwoo began to say that here, for example, and that he provides them with rest and food. He started saying that the more you use muscles, the less effective they are, and Rikshasha was surprised by his words. She thought he was too naive and that, as a human, he was just a human, even though he was a labyrinth master. Jinwoo suggested a walk to the training room, and she figured this maze wouldn't last long. He began to ask who was training there, and the servant began to say that mages were training there. After a few days, Jinwoo pondered that the labyrinth was developing too slowly, and to be precise, they didn't have many profound gems. The gems they extract from the mines are barely enough to pay their salaries. Jinwoo began to say that luckily they had plenty of food and also plenty of water. From time to time, their soldiers hunt monsters near the labyrinth to obtain gems and other materials. They get about 3 low-level gems per day, and one such gem only gives 3 units of energy. Jinwoo thought about how much he had overdone it then, and especially remembering how much he had spent on conscripting soldiers. The servant began to ask the master how many units they had now, and he replied that 2 soldiers had died in the last battle. Jinwoo began to say that the larger our army gets, the more difficult it is to command everyone individually, and that thanks to the scout, they are more likely to fight monsters. The acolyte began to say that if they hadn't called the priest, their army would have died out long ago. Jinwoo started to say that the soldiers are at mid-levels, but for some reason die in battle, and he doesn't understand how the situation on the 15th floor got to this point. The servant turned to the master and began to say that in the labyrinth is not the 15th level. Jinwoo began to say that this can't be, and that he had fallen into the Nagi maze when he fell from the 15th floor, and the deepest floor is the 2nd floor. The acolyte began to say that the labyrinth had consumed him, and after you took the throne, he returned you to your former place. She continued and began to say, and that sometimes derelict labyrinths find a potential master this way, and Jinwoo understood everything. He began to say that the reason why the things he had found during the expedition were left over from the war was because it was the most remote part of the geyser. Jinwoo then added that even the very entrance they had come through with the reporter was in the danger zone. The boy began to ask then what level of geyser they were on, and the servant began to say that she had never left the labyrinth since being summoned. Jinwoo thought that it had already been so long that it was pointless to worry about it now, and even at the deeper levels, there were safe places. He began to ask the servant if Rikshasha was still in the labyrinth, and the servant began to say that she was about to return from a reconnaissance mission. Dominicana started to ask why he needed this rude and arrogant girl, and he started to say that it was funny because he didn't know what level the labyrinth was on. Plus, she's been wandering around the geyser for quite some time and might have a couple ideas. Jinwoo came to the pub, and Rikshasha was already sitting there and started saying that she was honored to meet him. The maid started to say why let her know that they can't let someone like her into the owner's room. Rikshasha started asking so why they don't put a door there then, and the maid was furious at such words. A spark of rage flickered between the maid and Rikshasha, and Jinwoo told them to stop. Jinwoo started to ask Rikshasha if it was true that she had come down here by the geyser, and she said it was, and then he started to ask what level the labyrinth was on. She began to say that she remembered once hearing that people had divided the underworld into some categories. She added that, as a person born and raised in the underworld, she did not understand these categories. Jinwoo listened to her and thought about it, saying that it made sense. Rikshasha started to say, and that if he wanted, she could tell him about her wanderings before they hired her, and the guy thought it was a good idea. She started to say what she needed to think about, and after a short pause, started to say she was sorry to talk about it. Rikshasha began to say, that next to Naga's labyrinth is the labyrinth of the Water Dragon King. Creatures that managed to survive the war that took place in the dungeon. Rikshasha began to say that she had been there before coming to the Naga maze, and as far as she knew, that maze existed before the war. She continued and began to say that the master of the labyrinth is the Water Dragon King Anactus, and she began to say that he is the strongest among the water dragons. Jinwoo began to ask how close the labyrinth was, and she told him that it took 4 days to get there if you went straight. He began to say if the labyrinth existed even before the war, they are more than 2 decades old, and sure enough, the size, rank, and number of warriors are at an incredibly high level. If the mazes have unequal strengths, the weaker maze will definitely be absorbed by the stronger one. When he was a slave in one labyrinth, he stumbled upon battles almost always, and he's grateful to have been able to see it. Rikshasha started to say, what? It seems like they know about the existence of Naga's labyrinth, and he started to ask why she thought so. She began to say that between the 2 mazes, there is an area controlled by a predator blood leopard. The dragons tried to subdue the leopard, but failed every time. Jinwoo started to ask, what is it that means they failed to go in a straight line? And Rikshasha started to say what, considering the dragons are forced to go around the leopard's territory. She began to say that, plus, they are extremely slow, so it will take them about 2 months to get here, and Jinwoo began to say that they have time to prepare. Jinwoo began to say that she knew a lot more than he thought she did. Rikshasha confessed and started saying that she used to work for them. The servant girl accused the girl of being a servant girl, and Rikshasha initially asked her lest they misunderstand her. The girl began to say that she is a mercenary, and she only does what she is told to do, and now she was hired by King Naga. Jinwoo started to tell Rikshasha that he had a job for her, and she started to say that if he wanted to ask her to fight against water dragons, she would pass. The guy started telling her to tell him everything she had learned while working for the king of the water dragons, and then for her to learn the number of their troops. He started saying that they would not be wary of her if she left them, and Rikshasha started saying that it would cost them money. Jinwoo started saying that she didn't have to worry about money, and Rikshasha stopped talking and started asking her what they had given her for a week. The maid started to say that the elf woman had left after taking some food, and Jinwoo started to say that they should get to work too. The acolyte started to say what she thought the elf was hiding something, and the master started to say he knew about it. He started to say that Rikshasha started to ask her settle into a weak maze, even though she knew they were on the brink of war, and he knows she is definitely up to something. Jinwoo continued, and began to say that he doubted it was anything in the water dragon's interests, probably she was just a nomadic mercenary. The guy started to say that when Rikshasha told him about the water dragons, he didn't feel that he could trust her, and that Dominica was right. He started saying that of course she was just waiting to sell them. The servant started to say that in that case she should be sent away, but Jinwoo interrupted her and started to say that it was even better that they would think that the Naga soldiers were all their strength. And the fact that they have no gems at all, and they are filled with fear because of the war, and Dominican started to say that everything is like that, and Jinwoo started to say that everything is like that except the fear. When coming in, Rikshasha started to say, and that since the Great War, Anactus has been sitting in the shadows, and the guy started to ask why. She began to say that he had heard rumors that the humans possessed his weapons, capable of destroying him. Before the war, he was assured of complete immunity to all kinds of attacks. Anactus hid in the shadows because he began to fear humans, and Jinwoo began to say that now the king of Naga was a man, the very kind that Anactus fears so much. Jinwoo left, and as he was leaving, he began to say that he would return in 3 days and bring a gift. Meanwhile, a sleepy Jun Young got a phone call from someone, and she angrily reached for the phone. The girl didn't realize who needed her on her day off. She picked up the phone, and as it turned out, she got a call from Jinwoo. Junyoung was surprised that he called her and started asking if he wanted to join her team. The guy started asking the girl if she still wanted to repay for saving her life, and she was willing to do anything. A week into the war, the Nagi faced an army of water dragons. One of the water warriors, Draken, began to say that the Naga warriors were no match for them, and that they would not be able to leave a scratch on the Great One. He started saying that it's not, and they can't hurt him because he's too powerful and all, because of their class differences and because of the power of the Great Blood. Draken raged and said it was because he was a descendant of dragons. The other dragons started talking, and that he was back at it, and they wouldn't leave a scratch on them either. The dragon began to ask his comrade if he had forgotten how Anactus had made them listen, about his boundless power, and he talks about the descendants of dragons every day. Although, when they passed through the blood leopard territory, he couldn't even get a word out. Anactus started asking them about what they had started saying, and they replied that they were just thrilled. The dragons praised the legendary dragon descendant and said how powerful he was, and that he was the great dragon. Draken was itching to get to Naga's labyrinth, and is waiting for the day when he can rest on his throne. One of the dragons began to say that the throne belonged to Anactus, and that he needed to be careful with words that might spread. Anactus saw Naga's slave, and started saying that he was seeing another snake, and that they probably didn't realize they were invading at all. The slave was frightened and began to run away, to which Draken gave orders that he should not be allowed to leave. Draken started saying that they could find the entrance to the maze if they ran after him. The dragon leader grabbed Naga's slave and started telling him that he would pay for making him sweat. Draken started telling Nagi's slave to take them to his labyrinth, and he disappeared. The dragon leader began to ask if all dragon descendants were so noisy. Jinwoo came to the slave's aid, and Draken began to ask how he dared to desecrate the name of the dragons, and he began to ask what he was sick of living. Draken was furious, and told him to tell him who he was, and that he should show himself, and asked Jinwoo to tell him who he was. Jinwoo turned around to face the dragons, and proudly began to say that he was the king. The dragon began to ask why the king was human, and began to say that it was urgent to inform Anactus, and Draken began to tell them not to panic, and to trust him. Draken started telling Jinwoo to attack him because he is a great descendant of dragons, and he will face him. Jinwoo began to say that he had heard many times that he was a descendant of dragons, and then he told Dominique to start. The maid gave the order for the Nagi to prepare, and Draken was startled to see what they had ambushed. Draken saw that the ambush consisted solely of Naga slaves. He laughed, with that their maze had recently appeared, and they were already taking such risks. He began to ask how Jinwoo had the right to call himself king. Draken started to say that they can't even stand properly, and the servant girl started to tell him to shut his mouth and to know his place, and he was shocked by this. Dominicana began to say, that the slaves and the great servant girl were enough to destroy them. The maid gave the order for the slaves to start the fire. Rikshasha thought of the traps set up everywhere for the sole purpose of taking someone's life. She continued to ponder the fact that there was no resting place here and a completely meager food supply. The slaves here are forced to work to their last breath. She thinks this is the real labyrinth and some kind of paradise that miserable man has created. The Rikshasha came to Anactus and bowed down before him and addressed him. She began to say, and that now the Naga labyrinth is aware of the existence of the water dragon labyrinth, and soon they will begin to prepare for battle. Rikshasha started saying, that they are mining quite a few deep gems due to labor shortage. Anactus began to say that he wanted to take advantage of their desperation and convince them to subdue a blood leopard, whose death would seamlessly allow the leader to be destroyed. Rikshasha began to say, to begin the invasion of the Naga maze, while their forces would be depleted after the battle with the blood leopard. Perhaps he too would be able to enter the maze. Anactus praised Rikshasha and began to say that he would take her advice. Then he gave the order for Rikshasha to recommend the Naga labyrinth to attack the blood leopard, and complimenting it, he continued saying that they would set off tomorrow. After listening, Rikshasha began to say that, as she said, it would take about 2 months considering the speed of the water dragons. Meanwhile, Naga's slaves continued to fire on the water dragons, and Draken dodged bullets and howled in pain. One of the water dragons suddenly started talking about how these pathetic human cannons couldn't hurt them, but his speech was interrupted by a bullet that hit him in the head. Taking a bullet straight to the head, the water dragon was furious, and looking at the ground, he found drops of his liquid. The other water dragons began to say that it was dangerous, and King Anactus should be informed, and then he shouted that they were retreating. Meanwhile, the Naga warriors had completely surrounded the water dragons, and one of them noticed this, and shouted out to the others. Meanwhile, Jinwoo watched with indifference as the Naga warriors massacred the water dragons. At this time, the guy was thinking about the fact that these illegal guns and equipment were manufactured in order to resist the creatures of the underworld. At the moment of handing over the weapons, Junyeon started telling the guy that the power was greatly increased, so she wouldn't advise using them for long for safety reasons. After that, the girl began to ask him why he needed so many weapons, because he is the strongest one she knows, and he began to answer her that he uses them as toys. Watching the fight, Jinwoo began to say that the weapons are quite effective against the soldiers, even though they can't destroy them at first strike. Turning around a bit, he saw Dominique handling the weapon with a smile on her face, and he started to say that Dominique had gotten a taste for it. At this time, Draken was curling up and taking cover from the numerous bullets that were flying straight at him. In a moment, Draken realized that the bullets were not doing him any harm, and he put his body under the enemy's bullets. After a while, Draken noticed Jinwoo and started saying that the king himself had decided to show up, and Jinwoo struck at Draken without slowing down, but it was without success. A fierce fight broke out between Jinwoo and Draken, and during the fight, Draken struck Jinwoo with his tail, and he flew off into the wall. A great cloud of dust rose up, and the servant girl was greatly frightened for her master. As if nothing had happened, Jinwoo stepped out of the dust cloud and struck at Draken. After another fierce fight, Draken struck Jinwoo and thought he was going to die, but Jinwoo stood up and used the power of the parasite to strike again with his sword. By jumping and running his sword across Draken's chest, he was able to wound him, and Draken was very scared because of it. Scared for his life, Draken bowed down to Dominicana and Jinwoo and begged them for mercy. Then, he took the dragon oath. Draken swore in the name of dragons that he would never betray him. Suddenly, a bright light filled the room, and Jinwoo started telling him to stop playing with him, and the servant girl started saying that it was a dragon oath she hadn't seen before. He started saying that the Darikans are very noble and selfish, and they impose a restriction on themselves to indulge their exorbitant ego. But should they swear the dragon oath? Deviation from the words equates to an agonizing death. She started saying that he's definitely not a pureblood dragon since he doesn't have wings, but he is able to activate the oath. Jinwoo started to ask if it was true, and the dragon replied that it was, and it was a kind of curse. Jinwoo began to say that he had no ego, and he didn't see any hint of nobility in him. The guy started saying that he could be useful, and they would find a use for his strong body, and Draken thanked them. Jinwoo was talking to Draken, and he started to ask if it was true that the Dragon King's scales were much stronger than his, and he answered in the affirmative. Then he complimented and started saying that maybe things were hurting him pretty badly inside. Jinwoo began to say that he wanted to prevent the slightest hint of betrayal. The boy pulled his finger off the trigger and fired the gun straight at Draken. Jinwoo started to ask if death was better than some pain, and that he just needed to test the weapon. At that moment, Rikshasha came, and first asked that they had managed to catch Draken because she had not expected to see him in such a state. Jinwoo asked if the two of them knew each other, and Jinwoo said that they were in charge of different tasks, so they rarely crossed paths. Rikshasha started to say that it was unlikely that this lizard could remember her. Jinwoo began to ask Rikshasha when the dragons would be coming, and she was silent for a while. She started saying that they are recruiting troops and preparing for battle, and she believes they have 2 months. Jinwoo started to say that even so, he didn't think that they would have time to summon enough soldiers to level their forces. Rikshasha started saying that she had one risky proposal, and if he would allow it, she would voice it. The elfess began to say that her proposal was to attack the blood leopard. She is sure that the high-level profound gems that the leopard has will greatly help them in preparing for war. Before attacking him, she advises spending at least a week collecting gems and building up military might, and looking after the well-being of the labyrinth. The acolyte agreed with the elf's words, and she began to say that it seemed to be the only option, despite the danger. Jinwoo had instructed Rikshasha to draw a map to the blood leopard maze, and he gave 2 days to do so. Rikshasha started saying that she would do everything, but no further than the entrance to the labyrinth, and then he started saying he was leaving it to her. Jinwoo opened the portal and began telling the maid that it was time for him to go back. Dominicana first asked where he was going this time, and if he was bringing a human weapon, and he replied that the weapon was not powerful enough. Jinwoo started saying that he needed to find his savings, and he started saying that he would be back before Rikshasha came. Draken first asked his king if he could move. An hour later, somewhere inside the gateway to Paju, Jinwoo sorted through his bag and found what he needed. A banner popped up in front of the guy, saying whether he wanted to synchronize the maps, and he affirmatively started saying that he would synchronize everything. The banners popped up, informing that parts of the first, second, and third level geyser maps had successfully synchronized. Jinwoo started to say that this was great, and now he could get busy getting to the place where he left the gems. On their last expedition, it took them about 4 days to get from the first level to the abandoned maze on the third. Jinwoo started to say that he would run 9 times faster, and he initially asked the parasite to find all the profound gems. Since he is still a child of the dungeon, then he can move even faster, and he called for an increase in legs. Everything around the guy shimmered and glowed, but the guy was sitting still. After that, many banners appeared around him saying that he had obtained low-level profound gems. A portal appeared in front of the servant girl from which the master emerged, and he first asked if anything had happened while he was gone. Dominicana started to ask the master if he was okay, and he started to say that he had gotten into all the holes while getting to the third level. Jinwoo dumped a large bag filled with profound gems into the altar. The servant began to ask how he could get so many gems, and he said that it was all thanks to the parasite. Jinwoo thinks it's enough, but at the upper levels of the geyser, you can find gems of lower ranks, so it won't be enough for long. The guy began to think about where he could invest them because if he summoned 100 low-ranked soldiers, they would be useless. Jinwoo started to say that it would take about a week to improve the maze, and he remembered that Rikshasha had said they had about a month left. The guy started saying that he should just take his chances, and after improving the maze, call up the 5th-ranked soldiers and then start preparing for war. Jinwoo summoned several 4th-ranked Naga soldiers, and the banner showed what medium-sized Naga specialized in defense. At this time, Rikshasha was thinking that the Water Dragon King had decided to cut through the Blood Leopard's territory instead of going around it. Probably he was using slaves. It takes 1 day to get from Naga's labyrinth to the Blood Leopard. She began telling herself that the Water Dragon King would arrive within a week. The girl thought about the fact that no matter how much they prepare the Naga maze, doesn't stand a chance. Jinwoo ordered the Stone Warrior not to touch Rikshasha since she works in their maze. Rikshasha came to the guy, and he first asked if the card was ready, and she started saying it was ready. Jinwoo took the map from her and started saying that it was a great job, and Rikshasha started saying that it seems like they have more soldiers now. Rikshasha began to say that with such forces, they really have a chance to take over the territory of the Blood Leopard, and Jinwoo first asked what she was talking about. The guy started saying that they were tasked with guarding the maze while he was gone. He started to say that those soldiers who will participate in the capture are right here and pointed his finger at them. The elf started to say that they have no chance with these troops, and Jinwoo started to say that he will fight them, but the girl started to say that it's not about that. She started saying that they would all be destroyed and they could lose their lives. Then Jinwoo ordered her to be quiet, and then he first asked, how dare she look down on his soldiers? Rikshasha initially apologized for her rudeness, and she thought about how thoughtless she was to think that they really had a chance. Jinwoo then started saying that he hoped she had time to rest a bit, and Rikshasha started saying that she had, and she was well rested. The guy started to say that he would then like her to accompany them during the raid on the Blood Leopard. After that, Jinwoo started telling his team that they were leaving immediately. Rikshasha thought about the fact that the one had initially asked to make a map as an excuse to get her to leave the labyrinth for a couple days. The elven woman, after a short hike, began to say that they had arrived in the territory of a blood leopard, and she began to say that he should order the soldiers to be quiet. Rikshasha began to say that blood leopards specialize in stealth and ambush, so this is the perfect opportunity to attack, and one should prepare for an ambush. Jinwoo noticed that the elfess was getting very nervous, and she began to say that being a super predator blood leopard had ruled the area for decades. She started to say that she wouldn't want to die doing her job as a guide, and the guy turned around to look at his warriors. Rikshasha had agreed to accompany them, but it was still too dangerous here, and she wasn't sure if she would even make it out alive. Leading the way, Rikshasha could feel the lust for killing in this place. It's a controlled huge thirst that sends shivers down your spine. It means a bloody leopard is out there somewhere. The elfess sensed that it wasn't coming from her, and Jinwoo called out to her saying that if she turned around, she would die. The girl started saying that she didn't understand anything, and Jinwoo started saying that she didn't seem to particularly like the way he ran the maze. The girl had an opinion that loyalty to slave warriors and handmaids. Jinwoo began to tell her not to forget that he too was born on Earth, and he knows how everything works. Jinwoo began to say that he cares about his associates, and he gets rid of enemies. That's the way he is, and that he can't tell who she belongs to. He started to say that she's the limit of the Naga Labyrinth, and sold information about them to the Water Dragon. Rikshasha started to say that she used to run errands for the Water Dragon King, but that doesn't mean she still does. She started to say that she had done wrong the first day they met, but if she really was a spy, she wouldn't say she served the Water Dragon King. The elfess started saying that she was also spying for him, and this is what she gets in return, and Jinwoo didn't understand why she should be believed. Rikshasha started telling her master to believe her, and everything told to her is pure truth. Jinwoo agreed with her, and that was what was keeping him in no way uneasy. He first asked how she could justify going from one maze to another. The elfess started to say that she wasn't going to make excuses or plead with him, and as she started to say he had no proof. Jinwoo turned to Rikshasha and first asked if she had heard anything about parasites. She began to say that she had only heard of parasites, but had never seen them with her own eyes. Jinwoo started saying that he has one such parasite in him and in her too. Rikshasha glanced at her hand, and the parasite had already set about devouring it. Jinwoo began to say that he had put part of his parasite into her body back when they first met, and he enjoyed traveling with her. And the parasite especially enjoyed the trip into the Water Dragon Maze. Rikshasha first asked if Jinwoo would give her a chance again, and he said he liked her. The elfess began to say that she had severely underestimated him, and that, honestly, she didn't belong in either the Water Dragon Maze or the Naga Maze. Rikshasha lowered her head and began to say that she only wanted revenge on the Spirit King. She turned around and thought that this was where she would end up. Jinwoo started to say that he told her that if she died, if she turned around. The guy pushed Rikshasha away and she fell to the ground, after which she grudgingly touched her cheek. After Rikshasha came to her senses, she saw the bloody leopard and thought about how she didn't notice it earlier. Jinwoo thought about the fact that the blood leopard was able to camouflage itself even during battle and the fact that it had great speed. But despite all that, Jinwoo attacked the blood leopard and started saying that he could see it. Rikshasha was very frightened by this battle and was watching closely. The elfess thought about the fact that even though he had become a master of the labyrinth, despite the fact that she had underestimated him greatly, no matter how strong a man was, he was still a man. And that fact can't be changed, and now she can't see him as a person, and Jinwoo first asks how long she's going to sit. He started to say that they would continue the conversation after the battle, and if she wanted, she could run away right now.